Close your eyes, or soften your gaze. Unclench your jaw. Let your tongue rest on the floor of your mouth. Loosen the small muscles around your eyes. Imagine a blanket of quiet settling over your shoulders. We begin in northern Galilee, where the air after sundown tastes faintly of warm stone and thyme. Before us, the land opens into a broad saddle, a ridge that dips gently in the middle and lifts again into two rounded crests, twin humps of dark basalt known as the Horns of Hattin. They aren't dramatic. They don't pierce the sky. They sit with the patience of old furniture, used and useful exactly where the road needs them to be. To the east, a lake lies like a calm thought. People call it the Sea of Galilee or Lake Tiberias. The names change with the tongue that speaks them. The water keeps its shape. At night it gathers the moon in a wide, steady palm. Thin chains of house lights mark where villages lean toward the shore. Occasionally a dog barks, and before the sound arrives you see a ripple of movement in the lights, as if a small breeze had brushed a curtain. Let your breath meet the pace of this place. In for 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 1. Out for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good. Again softer. In for 4. Hold. And out for 6. We'll make an unhurried map, the kind of map drawn by someone who has time to walk each road twice. Start at the coast far to the west, where palms and masts line the curve of a harbor like careful handwriting. Acre sits there, and Tyre farther up, and Jaffa farther down, ports that inhale cargo and exhale news. From the sea the land rolls inland in folds, low hills stitched with scrub, vineyards and small plots that keep their own books in olives and grain. Trace your finger east across these folds until the hills flatten into a high open place, Saphuria or Sephoria. Think of it as a shelf where an army could set things down. Helmets, saddles, worry, and let horses nose into water without elbowing one another. The spring here is stubborn. Even in a lean year it remembers how to flow. From this plateau a road continues, not straight but sincere, bending with the land toward the lake. It dips where the earth dips, climbs where the ridge asks, then passes between the two rounded heights like a thread through the eye of a needle. Those heights are Hattin's horns. No one thing makes this landscape important. It is the meeting of small certainties. A road you can follow without thinking, a water source you can find in the dark, a rise you can hold if you need to look farther than the reach of your arm. Summer heat presses down here. Winter rain tidies the air. In spring, short grass makes one last brave show of green before the sun quiets it back to beige. The land remembers cycles the way a good baker remembers how many turns a dough needs, without counting. If a breeze has found you, let it smooth your thoughts. If it hasn't, imagine one. Lake-cooled air slipping across the saddle, low and even like a hand calming the grain of a table. On this ridge, sound travels farther than you expect. Hoofbeats wrapped in leather and dust carry well. A cartwheel rattling a loose pin seems louder than it is. Words spoken near the ground drift upward and out, and the hills listen without comment. Look down if you like. The path shows what it has seen. Narrower, deeper ruts where wheels have passed. Small arcs of chipped stone where shoes have slid. A blackened seam of rock where brush once burned and left a bruise of soot that even rain could not persuade to leave. The ground is a quiet archive. Bring your attention to your hands, relax the base of your thumbs, spread your fingers, then let them fall. The map will hold itself while you rest. When people come here in the daytime, they squint and shade their eyes. At night, the shapes arrange themselves kindly. Two soft humps against a sky that is more velvet than black. The horizon dims to a simple line. Somewhere a shepherd with a small lamp checks a rope. Somewhere a pair of travelers sits with their backs against a low wall and divides a flat loaf between them, the crust cracking softly like dry bark. In the dark you notice the small math of comfort, how far it is between wells, how many mouthfuls of water make a good mood. how much shade you need to feel courageous again. There's a kind of geography you can draw with words and a kind you can only draw with waiting. We'll use both. Imagine a lantern at your feet, not bright. It leaves much of the night intact. Its light is enough to read the nearby ground, a tuft of thyme, a line of ants carrying something purposeful, the neat scallop of a lizard's tail where it crossed the dust earlier and didn't return. Outside the circle, the dark isn't hostile. It's simply room for sleep to gather. Breathe, darling listener. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. If your mind wanders, that's fine. It can meander along one of the smaller paths that skirt the ridge. It might find a cluster of bee boxes set back from the wind, or a goat trail that knows a kinda angle up the slope. It might discover a hollow where rain collects and lingers long enough for one kind of grass to thrive and another to give up. When it's ready, your mind will wander back, as minds do, following the scent of a comfortable voice. Let's add a few gentle points to our map. South and a little west, Nazareth sinks into folds of hills. Farther south, the road finds its way toward Jerusalem, where stone outlives kings and shade saves lives. North and east, the land rises toward higher country, then falls into plains where dust has the last word in the dry months. None of this presses on us tonight. It's just the background hum. What matters is the ridge and the lake and the certain curve of a road that has carried everything from mule carts to melodies. There is a habit the land teaches. Look for water first. It's a simple habit, almost shy, and it unlocks everything else. Springs are more than dots on a map. They decide where a person rests, where animals calm, where tempers ease. A man who knows a hidden cistern knows 100 arguments you won't need to have. In this saddle, that knowledge is a kind of kindness. The spring at Saphuria allows rest. The lake to the east promises relief that is not always easy to reach. Between them sits Hattin, a hinge on which choices swing. Let your shoulders drop another centimeter. Imagine the skin at the back of your neck warming and then letting go. Feel the bed, the chair, the couch holding you steadily, the way the saddle holds the road. Hattin's horns are not knife edges. They have round backs that a child could climb if the day weren't so hot. In the saddle between them, the wind pools. On some nights, if you lie on your back and listen, the breeze sounds like whispering pages. On some mornings, the first light slides up the eastern horn, curls along its spine, then tips over into the bowl of the saddle as if pouring itself gently. It's a small spectacle repeated without an audience, the way a kettle murmurs every time it boils. Think of how many feet and hooves this path has known. Shepherds pushing a slow line of sheep, pack trains with bells that knock a quiet beat, pilgrims measuring the road with their patience, envoys who want to be seen and scouts who hope not to be. The ridge is not impressed. It weighs each step the same, then gives it back as dust. We'll stay with the simplest details, the smell of warm leather, the way a strap creaks when a load shifts, the coolness that lingers at the lip of a cistern even after noon, the small blessing of a low wall whose shade is exactly wide enough for 2 people, the soft rasp of a knife on a whetstone long before dawn, because a blade isn't a promise until it's ready, and even then, it is most often used to cut bread and twine. Bring your attention to your breath again. Not to control it, just to notice it like you'd notice a friendly stream. It moves without needing you to push. In for 4, hold, out for 6. If the count wants to slow, let it. There's a reason we begin here at night. With the land calm and the map unrolled in quiet. History can be loud on the page, banners, trumpets, arguments in courtyards. But most of what decides a day is soft-spoken. How far it is from one dependable drink to the next. Whether the wind sets smoke toward you or away from you. Whether you choose the lower road with a kinder slope or the higher one with a kinder view. The Horns of Hattin hold these soft decisions the way a bowl holds fruit. Without commentary. Content to be useful. If you're drifting, you can drift. The ridge will keep its place. If you're still awake, move with me to the edge of the saddle and look down the eastern slope. Somewhere below, the lake darkens into ink. Between here and there, a ragged line of scrub steals water from the air and pretends to be a hedge. If you listen harder, you'll hear, not quite now and not quite later, the steady beat of oars, someone ferrying something or nothing to somewhere, in the way people do when they have a boat and a reason. Now look west again, the way the road came. Imagine the low hum of a camp at Safuria when the air is both dusty and sweet, men laughing too softly to wake anyone, a pot clicking as it cools, the hush that falls when a waterskin is passed, and each person takes just enough and no more. Even without seeing it, you know the shape of the night there, the tents like dull stones in the dark, the horses freshly rubbed down, the rope lines tight and straight, so no one stumbles where the shade will be come morning. At the horns themselves, the stone is pitted and honest. Touch it in your mind. It's warmer than the air, then cooler, then the same. Basalt remembers heat and lets it go. If you rest your palm there and wait, your heartbeat will slow to meet the land's steadier pulse. That's the rhythm we're after tonight, the rhythm of a place that asks nothing from you except time. You can count that rhythm if you like, or you can let it count you. Each breath a soft bead on a string, each exhale a small untangling. If a thought arrives with a loud coat on, nod at it and watch it keep walking. There is no door to close. There is only a path that curves out of sight, and the knowledge that the path will still be there when you need it. Add a small detail to our map, a pile of stones beside the road, not a marker of anything solemn. Just where a wagon lost its balance long ago and someone righted it and left a handful of rocks in a little memorial to the problem and its solution. Add another, a fig tree near a trickle of water stubbornly alive where it should have given up, offering a few late fruits to a boy who knows where to look. Add one more, a black feather caught in a tuft of grass, light as a sigh. There's a way the night changes just before you fall asleep. Edges blur, priorities loosen, names soften into shapes. We'll keep traveling at that speed. Hattin will not hurry you. The lake will not demand a conclusion. The ridge will not collapse into meaning. It's enough to be here and know where here is. Let the map settle. The lake to the east, a long silver breath. The saddle, a gentle fold holding wind. Two rounded hills, old and sure, a trustworthy spring far to the west. Between them, a road that curves like a patient sentence. Now let the map soften. Light fades. The road is a memory. The spring is a promise. The lake is a cool thought held in reserve. The horns are two steady hands resting on a table. If you wish, sweep your attention from head to toe in a slow inventory. Forehead smooth, eyes quiet, cheeks slack, jaw loose, neck released, shoulders heavy, arms warm, hands open, chest light, belly soft, hips resting, thighs supported, calves unburdened, ankles easy, feet relaxed. If anywhere clings, breathe into that grip and let the exhale carry it 1 inch away from you. In for 4, hold for 1, out for 6. Before we close the chapter, a last, smaller map. The inside map, the one your body keeps. You know how to find the edge of your breath in the same way a traveler knows how to find the edge of a lake at night, by listening. You know how to turn slowly into the position that invites sleep, the way a cart turns into the portion of the road that shows fewer stones. You know how to carry just enough into tomorrow and leave the rest here, on this ridge, where the wind will keep it safe. We are still on the ridge, the lake to our right, the spring at Safuria behind us like a held note. The calendar lifts and settles on the late 11th century. A winter council far away sets many small things in motion. Wax seals pressed to letters, lists of flour and salt, decisions about who will travel and who will keep the hearth. Those decisions do not shout, they accumulate. Carts get mended, shoes get resoled. Sails get patched while a thin sun crosses a pale sky. Across seasons, the road lengthens under practical feet. Fields give way to tracks, tracks to roads, roads to sea lanes marked by habit and stars. When 1099 arrives and the city on the hill changes hands, the land notices in its usual way. Repairs to gates, new hands counting tolls at bridges, different prayers at old hours. The coast begins to work as a pair of lungs for the young Latin polities, breathing in grain, oil, timber, iron, breathing out letters, rumors, promises. Daily life sketches the outline of a kingdom. Markets open with the same clatter of shutters and the same arguments over weights. Scribes keep tallies with dry, patient strokes. Mule trains bring pepper and linen and lamp oil under the same pale awnings. Pilgrims arrive dusty and leave sun-browned, trading stories for directions. The calm voice under all this says, keep the roads sound, keep the wells clean, keep the watch steady. It is the calm voice that makes larger voices possible. Two brotherhoods take root in this work of steadiness. One devotes itself to care and lodging and the safe conduct of travelers, the other to keeping armed watch where watch is needed. Their rules trim the excess from a day, but their attention belongs to distances and water. They learn which tracks hold mud after a storm and which stones sweat cool at noon. When they speak in councils, their sentences begin with from here to there, and from first light to the third hour, and from one skin to the next. Their maps are not only lines, they are rhythms, how a column moves when it is rested, how it frays when it is not. Elsewhere, the same arithmetic is studied under other roofs. In Cairo and Damascus, ledgers also fill, messengers also run the known routes. Alliances tighten and loosen on the hinge of timing, obligations, and weather. Out of these rooms steps a man who prefers durable arrangements to swift flashes, Saladin. He gathers authority as one gathers a net, not by jerking at it, but by drawing steadily, until the line lies where it belongs. He is careful with promises. He stores patience as other men store grain. Years pass with more barter than battle. Truces arrive written in sober ink. Some are tested at the edges, some lapse without drama, some hold long enough for an orchard to bear and be picked twice. The land harvests predictably, barley, olives, grapes, stories. The stories cross languages in the port cities where a clerk moves little stones on a counting board, while a baker pulls flat loaves from an oven and a sailor pretends not to watch the wind. On one wall, a notice, truce extended, a nod, a shrug. The day continues. Bring your attention inland again. The plateau at Safiria offers level ground and water that keeps its word. The road to the lake rises and bends, and near Hattin looks briefly like a choice made into stone. In high heat, the pale rock trembles in the air. In the earliest morning, a shadow from the eastern horn slides long and thin across the saddle, as if to underline something important. Between the plateau and the water, a set of questions waits in quiet. If smoke appears over Tiberias, do you leave your spring to test it? Or do you let the spring test those who lit the fire? If a siege begins, is your duty to the town immediate, or to the road that keeps all towns possible? If help must go, how many skins go with it, and whose horses will not pay the price twice? Names enter the frame not as thunderbolts, but as voices in these rooms of decision. Guy wears the crown wears its doubts. Raymond counts with the habit of a man who has paid costs from his own stores and learned where losses come from. Reynold is a sharp edges cut and also fray. The masters of the orders move a finger along a map from spring to saddle, from saddle to lake, and say the quiet things. This is 2 hard hours with full skins in cool weather. In high sun it is 3. If the column strings out, it is 4. 4 is dangerous. Around the table, no one disagrees with the map. Men disagree with the feeling of waiting at a spring while smoke rises. Beyond these rooms, Saladin keeps his coalition attentive without exhausting it. He lets promises age long enough to become habit. He picks moments when the land will do his arguing for him, heat enough to slow a rescue, dryness enough to bite, distances arranged so that a hasty march stretches thin and a thin line breaks. When the truce serves his shape, he keeps it. When it does not, he courts the risk with enough margin to accept what the land refuses. A few incidents draw brighter lines across the months. A caravan taken badly becomes a hinge. A raid meant as a message is read as a taunt. Messengers ride faster for a week. Councils sit longer. Then the rhythm returns, but not quite to where it was. The road keeps its secrets and also keeps its count. Breathe without counting for a moment and let the road you're imagining draw itself forward. It runs through quiet villages where a well's shade is prized, where a boy learning the weight of a helm laughs at himself, where a woman trades thread for oil and gets the better of the exchange by one careful measure. It runs past a fig tree that refuses to fail. It runs past a blackened patch on a stone where brush once burned to move smoke the way a commander wanted smoke to move. It runs to Hattin's saddle and does not ask, yet, for answers. The years narrow. The lake glints at the edge of too many maps at once. A rumor of pressure around Tiberias lingers. Then the rumor becomes a plan. Then the plan becomes motion. On the plateau at Saphuria, canvas is stretched. The air under it is cooler by a slim but meaningful amount. A table holds parchment weighted at the corners. A cup of water leaves a ring. A fly walks the ring like a moat. Men speak in measured tones, an old discipline learned from necessity. Words like relieve and hold lie next to each other without resolving. The spring tells its part by continuing to run. At the same time, the low arithmetic of the road accumulates its sums. Saddle soap and whetstone, spare pins for wheels, thongs for mending a strap, barley for the beasts, skins counted, then counted again, a note pinned to a list. The smaller cistern near the olive grove is half what it was last year. The ground around it is soft in the morning and sand by afternoon. Scouts return with a heat about them that is not only from the sun. They speak about dust columns to the east that begin and end days in the same places and what that means. They sleep sitting up against a rope line because unrolling a blanket would undo the effort of keeping a map in one's head intact. No one says the word Hattin with ceremony. It is a hill on a ridge on a road as it has always been. It is also the place the road will name when it matters what the air is like at the saddle, how hard it is to form on a slope, how far it is between a thirst and a drink. The word sits quietly in the back of the room, while decisions speak in the front. The council ends without ending. People stand and step away. Someone returns to ask a small question about pack order. Someone else notes that the freshest horses should not be put in the rear if heat will climb early. Another person mentions a patch of ground that looks level and is not, a habit of the earth here that hurts wheels more than hooves. A clerk writes, "Remember the shade line under the hill from first to second hour. Use it." The ridge we're on receives all this without preference. It is still basalt and scrub, time and dust, a place that remembers how far a tired man will carry his kit before he stops and how much farther he will go if a friend takes the strap for a while. The lake keeps its surface even when the air above it flickers. The spring at Saphuria speaks in the same voice as ever, low and steady. Light changes along the eastern horn. The edge that looked silver in the dark takes on a softness that hints at a coming day without insisting on it. The thin ground cover holds a darker green in the fold that leads toward the lake. A shepherd moves his flock with more suggestion than command. In the distance, a line of dust that could be wind is not wind. Nothing concludes. The map continues. The voices that prefer movement are already tightening girths. The voices that prefer waiting are counting aloud from spring to saddle because numbers spoken in the air are sometimes heavier than numbers kept in the head. Both habits are forms of care. Both try to spare lives by different paths. We stay with the low details because the low details carry weight without raising theirs. A strap is replaced before it fails. A nail is removed from a hoof before it ruins a day. A skin is hung in a faint draft where it cools better than it would in direct air. That little better matters when the third hour arrives. A scout runs a finger along a line on a map and feels the slight grit of ink lifted by too many hands. The line still points to the saddle. The sun does not leap, it slides. The lake does not flash, it brightens. The ridge does not wake, it simply receives a new shade of itself. Men who slept rise without complaint, not because they enjoy the hour, but because the hour is the currency of not needing to enjoy worse ones later. Horses stamp and shake dust in low clouds that fall back on their flanks. Harness buckles touch and separate with a plain music. The column that will move does not yet move. The counsel that will prevail has not yet prevailed. This is the breath between, and it is long because those who can lengthen it are trying to. We remain on the saddle watching the map bring itself closer to the lives that will follow it. A clerk draws a small circle where shade will be at the 4th hour. A sergeant takes skins from men who filled them poorly and fills them properly while saying nothing that would make the men more clumsy the next time. A boy new to this work learns to coil a rope so it plays out smooth and doesn't lift dust uselessly. He repeats the coiling 3 times until his hands have the habit and his mind can move on to the next small craft. On the lake, a boat turns with a quiet decision and points its bow toward a place that will not be Hattin and will still be part of the same day. The man at the oar adds effort without showing strain. He is deciding a time to arrive rather than a place. He knows the place already. The spring at Saphuria continues to teach its lesson by being itself, a measured flow, a limit that is enough if honored and hard if ignored. Men gather around it not because water is rare, but because predictability is rare. Around the spring, watchfulness becomes a physical thing. It sits on shoulders like a cloak. The ridge where we stand accepts the weight of what is coming and the weight of what might not come if someone counts right, walks right, stops at the right sliver of shade for the right number of breaths. We keep counting without ending. The chapter does not close. The road does not stop. The air warms a little and holds steady. The lake brightens by one small shade and holds steady. The voices resolve one more narrow question about which wagon will carry which part of a forge, because the day ahead is made of iron and water and distance, and each part must be ready to meet the others without waste. The ridge remains, the map remains. The movement has not yet begun, and is already underway in the way hands move when they know a pattern. The word Hattin sits in the mouth like a round stone, there, but not thrown. We keep walking the lines with our eyes, spring to saddle, saddle to lake, without leaving the place we are in. The steadiness is deliberate, the breath stays even. We stay on the ridge and let the people arrive one by one, as if they were walking out of the dusk and taking a place in a wide circle. No speeches, no horns, only small habits and the work of hands. The land around Hattin listens and remembers them all the same way it remembers hoofprints. He prefers a table that faces the door and a mat rolled tight until it's needed. His letters travel as steadily as caravans, and when they return, the seals are unbroken and the ropes are well tied. He keeps a habit of looking first to the line of the horizon, then to the jug of water, then to the faces around him in that order, as if to say, distance, supply, trust. His strength does not arrive all at once. It accumulates like shade under an awning. He is careful with promises and stingy with anger. When he studies a map, he traces valleys with one finger and winds with another, because a commander who follows only the roads on parchment will find himself surprised by the roads in the air. He favors restraint as a tool and uses it like a quiet blade, sparingly, precisely, kept oiled, rarely shown. When he moves, he wants the land as an accomplice, heat as a helper, water as a test, distance as a sieve. He is not sentimental about difficulty. He hoards patience and spends it where profit multiplies, on sieges that would waste the reckless, on truces that give his people time to plant and harvest, on councils that end without drama and begin again clean. He carries faith the way he carries steel, without shouting, with care for the edge. In camp, his tent is orderly but not ornate. A boy who brings a message is given a drink before an answer. Shoes are stacked, not flung. The ground at the entrance is swept. None of this wins a battle. All of this keeps an army. He does not say the word Hattin, he says water, shade, march, and he lets the hills pick their own names. He holds a cup by the base, not the rim, to keep his fingers from being seen when they shake. The crown fits, the season does not. In the council shade he watches faces as often as maps, seeking agreement the way a thirsty man seeks a spring, hoping for the sound first. His voice can be firm, his decisions sometimes are not. He is not faithless, only pulled. He wears responsibility like new armor. The plates gleam, the straps chafe. The men around him have lived on this land longer than he has, and he knows it. He is cautious of appearing cautious, careful of appearing careless. The two worries grind against one another, a small rasp beneath every judgment. When the word relieve is spoken, it stirs him. When the word hold is spoken, it steadies him. He wants to be the king who moved when moving was right, and waited when waiting was wise. He wants that, and the day is not interested in his wanting. He loosens and tightens the idea of Hattin in his mind like a strap. There are voices beside him that say now, and voices behind him that say not yet, and he is learning that in the space between those words a road can lengthen or vanish. He knows Galilee as a shepherd knows his hillside, by how long a man can walk between breaths, by which rock keeps cool after noon, by where a wheel sinks and a hoof does not. His patience is not passivity, it is a ledger. He measures campaigns in cups, not in cries. He will stand at the edge of a map and speak in distances that sound like sentences. From Safaria to the saddle in the first heat, 2 hours, with baggage, 3, with worry, 4, with a mistake, longer than you want to pay. He has made mistakes and paid them and has no interest in paying twice. He does not dislike boldness, he dislikes waste. He would rather be called slow by men who will live than praised for speed by widows. He wants the field army to be a promise no one is foolish enough to test, which is a different thing than a rescue that arrives out of breath. When he looks east, he sees the lake and all the roads that feed it. When he looks west, he sees the spring and the years it represents. When he looks at Hattin, he sees a question with only 2 decent answers, not today or with water. He was born with a marching drum under his ribs. Stillness makes him itch. He believes that a sharp move can fix a slow problem, and he is not always wrong, which is its own kind of trouble. He calls a caravan an opportunity and a truce a table with one leg shorter than it looks. His armory includes audacity and appetite. His hand never strays far from the hilt of a plan. He has friends who cheer when he rides, and enemies who learn his habits by counting the days between his appearances. He does not count shade, he counts moments. He lays a finger on the map where roads narrow and names the pinch points aloud as if to cast a net there in advance. He prefers certainty in the next hour to stability in the next month. He says the word relieve like a promise, and the word wait like an insult he refuses to accept. He sees Hattin as a gate to be kicked, not a hinge to be set with oil. The land has thoughts about that. He does not ask them. A queen who moves in corridors threaded with whispers, her presence smooths rooms the way a hand smooths linen. She signs with a steady flourish, weighs letters with fingers that remember weight from other kinds of burdens. She knows faces by the shifts around their eyes. She knows that a crown is a chorus conducted with a nod more often than a shout. In her orbit, factions breathe the same air. She has practiced the art of opening a door slightly and letting 2 people who say they cannot speak to each other speak. She carries memory not as a ledger but as a loom. Threads that others call grudges she calls patterns, and keeps them from unraveling where she can. She blesses banners and hands and marriages as the season requires. She reads a map longer than a campaign, the map of a realm that must be livable as well as defendable. Hattin, to her, is not 2 hills, but the distance between a council table and the families who sleep behind city walls. Her voice is gentle, her decisions are not always. They are clocks set to the road, their mornings are earlier than most. They count quietly. Men, mounts, nails, pins, skins, candles, oats. Their rules are a skeleton that keeps the body of an army standing. They have learned to make the bed of a wounded man as carefully as they oil a bowstring, because both jobs are about tension and release. SFX, chainmail brushes cloth, a wooden ladle dips, a strap is tested and clicks. Their houses on the road are way stations where the map sleeps. They replace what is frayed and predict what will fray next. They do not romanticize distance. They know how long a standard takes to shift from one hand to the next when fingers are tired. They know how quickly thirst turns brave men into brittle men. They are suspicious of swagger and love a list. When they speak in council, their sentences have no ornament. If we move early. If we hold the spring. If we fight formed. They advise commanders to treat Hattin like a stair. Take it a step at a time or you will stumble. They wear the day on their skin. They return with lines at the corner of the mouth from squinting into distance and from keeping quiet when talk would be a comfort. Their reports are short because the road is long. They know where a new path has begun to form because the scrub has a different way of lying down along it. They know where a stream still hides in soil by the shape of the plants that pretend it doesn't. They smell smoke from places maps cannot see. They speak of the enemy the way a farmer speaks of weather, observant, practical, unoffended. They mark Hattin by a small scar of stone on the north face and by how the wind feels in the saddle an hour after dawn. They can tell you whether a column will arrive disordered by listening to the pattern of hoofbeats that carry ahead of it in the heat. They hold the campaign together in ink and breath. They write inventories and promises, transcribe truces and terms, render one language into another without letting meaning stumble. Their desks are boxes that travel, their lamps are kept low, their white knives press wax smooth. They listen more than they speak. They keep private maps of alliances, of debts, of men who take words seriously and men who file them like thread to be used when needed. They are not glamorous and they know it. They copy the sentence hold at the spring as carefully as they copy March at first light, and they prefer when the former becomes the latter only with water in hand. They measure Hattin in lines and seals, a place that appears in reports with increasing frequency, a name that moves from the margin toward the center without anyone proclaiming it so. They listen to animals and people in the same calm. They run a hand down a fetlock and across a jaw and hear what will become a problem before the rider admits it. They know the taste of iron and the smell of bruised grass. Their tools are simple, heavy, effective. They measure a march by mouths. They argue, for the horse's sake and the army's, that a column is as strong as its quietest hoof. They mend before it breaks. They are always a little dusty and a little amused by commanders who forget that decisions ride. Hattin, to them, is a grade and a surface, a test for feet, the kind of slope that will tempt a man to lean too far forward and knock a nail loose before midday. They know where to dig because their parents knew where to dig. They can tell a hidden line of moisture by the way ants move at evening. They keep lids tight and measure drawdown with a stick that has notches cut by years rather than by guesses. They are not loud in councils. They bend over ground and listen to a soaked silence that answers them eventually. They teach with buckets and palms, not with diagrams. They insist that the measure for men and animals be recorded, and they make voices who dislike arithmetic wait until the numbers stop arguing. They speak the word Hattin with a look at the sky, as if to ask what kind of day it plans to be. He smells of leather and paper. He has the habit of straightening a corner of cloth on a table before he sits. He speaks of towns as if each were a person with tempers and talents. He is not easily impressed and not easily insulted. His advice is often about what can be done with what is at hand. He believes in doors, in keeping them open long enough for the right people to pass through and closed early enough to keep the wrong trouble out. He treats the land as a partner, not a stage. He walks into the weather he has, not the weather he wished for on the map. Hattin is to him an unpleasant but intelligible slope, one to avoid if possible and to respect if not. They keep time for camps that would otherwise forget it. Bells and calls and quiet offices mark the hours. They bless standards and water and bread. They hear the small tremor in a voice at dawn, and answer with words that have seen many dawns. They tie conscience to discipline without tying it into knots. They walk the lines and learn men's names. They know who has not slept, who has not written home, who drinks too fast at the skin, who prays when praised and not when pressed. They are not naive. They have buried enough men to respect caution and enough to honor courage without making it theatrical. Hattin to them is a place to bring a standard and to guard a relic without letting its weight become heavier than the water it costs to carry it. Where Saladin is patience shaped into decision, his brother moves like a ledger you can walk inside. He arranges men and grain and coin so that none of them go hungry in the wrong order. He shifts units the way a careful hand shifts cups on a tray. No spills, no clatter. He dislikes spectacle because it tangles lines. He trusts sub-commanders who return reports in the same structure they were sent. Place, time, number, need. He can read a map from the corner and still see the center. He can smell which promise will sour if not stirred today. Hattin is for him a supply problem with a view. Where to direct waterskins so the circle tightens, where to rest wings so the hands that hold it do not shake when it must be lifted. They test the edges and come back laughing softly, not because danger is funny, but because they are relieved to have measured it and found it possible. They are wind and signal sudden and then gone, not letting themselves be pinned to ground they do not choose. They know the line between taunt and test and walk it carefully when they are wise, carelessly when they are learning. They will pour smoke through dry scrub and then withdraw as if it were a curtain they arranged for a stage. They are proud of their horses and have reason to be. They argue for movement and practice, and when the day comes for patience, they chafe and obey. They say Hattin the way young men say any landmark that will belong to the season they are in, with a mix of respect and appetite. They bring small luxuries and big necessities. They measure risk in coin and rumor. They know when a road is about to become expensive and when a city will turn its face to a new flag without turning its back on customers. Their wagons are bright with cloth and dull with flour. They carry needles and twine and news you cannot get from councils. They make a camp livable, and in doing so make an army less brittle. They sell ink when someone's courage requires a letter, and thread when someone's sleeve requires a seam. They watch the sky and the price of barley with equal care. Hattin is a stall they will set up where they are told, a slope they will complain about, a day whose cost they will count in bread and water sold. They do not sleep badly. They sleep shallow. Their dreams are not of glory. They are of grip. They practice letting the staff skim from palm to palm without losing the line of their shoulders. They understand wind as a force that does not care about names. They hate panic and love formation. They look at slopes and see angles. They look at crowds and see currents. They keep their bodies square even when the day tilts. They do not speak much. They do not need to. Their task speaks for them. Hattin to them is a saddle where a standard must be steadier than the men beneath it feel. Every council has a man or woman who says, "Show me the well first," when others say, "Show me the road." They ask unadorned questions. How many skins? How many spare pins? Whose horses are fresh? They accept silence for an answer only if the silence is thoughtful, not embarrassed. They are not beloved until after. Then they are cherished if remembered. They save lives by wearing the unglamorous coat of doubt. They smell heat in sentences and pour water there. They do not always win arguments, they win hours. Hattin is to them a word that pulls up the same old questions and thus earns the same old caution. The circle fills and quiets. These are the voices that carry a season, patience and appetite, counting and daring, ink and rope and leather and prayer. None of them alone decides a day. Together they lean it. The ridge underfoot does not choose a favorite. It takes the press of each person's step and flattens it into memory with equal care. The lake keeps its level arguments with the wind. The road waits with its curve. Breathe once more with the camp. In for 4. Hold for 1. Out for 6. The people return to their tents and tasks. The map remains on the table, corners weighted, names dark where fingers have traced them too often. The word Hattin rests in the ink with the patience of stone, and the night keeps moving, pulling the day a little closer without making any promises it cannot keep. We stay with the map open and the air cool. The years narrow to 2 slow beads on a string, 1186 and 1187, years that look ordinary at arm's length and grow complicated when you lean close. The truce between realms holds like a rope that has borne many loads, still sound but with fibers that lift if you run a thumb along them. A truce is a household. It needs sweeping and mending. Clerks recopy its terms so no word blurs. Messengers carry confirmations with seals that shine like small moons. On the roads, it feels like fewer lances in view and more mules with bells that knock a mild rhythm. Traders price dates and pepper with less suspicion. Pilgrims listen for bandits and hear mostly birds. Yet even in a good season, truce-keeping is work. Border forts keep quiet by effort, not accident. At the gates of towns, toll-keepers weigh sacks and stories. Hear a dispute over a confiscated mule. There a quarrel about which language a contract was truly written in. Judges settle, interpreters smooth, notaries note. 100 small brush fires die out because 100 small cups of water are ready. Then a larger spark lands where the ground is driest. Some men trust the truce like a bridge they have crossed many times. Others test its planks with the end of a spear and say they hear rot. Raymond of Tripoli is not the only man who doubts paper. He is the man whose doubts travel quickest. When caravans cross near his reach, he sees provocation where others see permission. Where his peers count customs, he counts nerve. A caravan is seized. Another is threatened. Complaints ride as hard as rumors. Restitution is demanded in firm words, then in firmer ones. The truce, written to be a pillow between sharp corners, is suddenly asked to be a shield. It is not made for that. Replies climb in temperature, release, repay, answer for breach. The word insult appears more often in letters, and letters that must carry that word grow heavy on the road. In some tellings there are personal threads knotted into the rope. Kinsfolk insulted, couriers mistreated, a grievance that refuses to shrink. In other tellings, the thread is simpler, a pattern of taking to prove taking is possible. Either way, the cloth puckers. A man like Raymond imagines boldness will teach respect. A man like Saladin imagines boldness will teach consequence. These imaginations are on a course to meet. Patience is not infinite. It is a stored harvest. Saladin has gathered it season by season in Egypt and Syria, spending just enough to buy the next crop. He has let truces run when they fed his people and allowed his lines to settle into habit. Now he counts the breaches with the same plain beads he uses to count grain. He writes to allies and kinsmen, not with flame, but with invitation. Assemble, water your beasts along the old lines, bring the standard you carry in good years and bad. The summons is disciplined, not loud. He asks commanders to arrive balanced, not spent, to reach the theater with the knees still soft, the horses' mouths unblooded, the temper even. He does not rush to an hour that will make him thirsty too soon. Where to gather, where to set lines that can close and open like a hand. He prefers ground that argues his case for him. Heat in the human hours. Shade spare but known, wells measured, roads that allow a scattered ride and a tight return. He does not say Hattin, he says the valleys, the springs, the passes. By the coast, sellers fold bright cloth, Buyers tie knots in cords to remember the measure they paid for. People who do not follow politics can still read prices, and prices whisper first. Grain edges up a little, then stays there. Harness menders have more work than usual. Letters take longer to arrive, then arrive in clusters, and the news inside them is older by the time it is read. In Acre, a clerk who loves neat columns draws a small ink mark next to entries that mention interruption. Not a word to worry a child, but one that makes his fingers slow on the abacus. In Tyre, a ship's master asked casually about insurance for a route that did not used to need it. No one rings a bell. The sea just tilts its head and listens. Inland, the roads wear their usual morning face, mules shaking their ears, carts negotiating ruts, children racing each other along stone fences. But there is a layer beneath the day. Watchmen up a little earlier, shepherds choosing fold over fields, smoke from small hilltop fires coiling in a language scouts are trained to read. Tiberius, sitting sober by the lake, keeps its routine. The market opens. The lake gives fish willingly or not, as it always does. Yet a governor stands longer than usual on the wall and narrows his eyes toward the plateau. Not because something is visible, but because the air has that tense fairness before a storm when it withholds clues. Pressure finds a place to show itself. Forces gather near the lake, not all at once, but in those quiet accretions a practiced commander prefers, a camp that looks smaller than it is because the tents are placed with care, patrols that appear where they are useful rather than dramatic, raids like pinpricks that tell you less about the blade than about where it intends to cut. There is a probing then more. A town hears knocking at its outer door. A citadel holds the key to its inner room. The ordinary part of siege begins. Lookouts with strained necks, cistern lids lifted more often than is comfortable, sums done twice to make sure flour stretches past impatience. Those inside count on the season's habit of relief. Those outside count on the season's habit of error. News runs to Saphuria with hot breath. The town is pressed. The keep is sure for now. Fires visible in the second watch. Numbers guessed, then revised. Dates, places, degrees. No blood in the sentences. Only the grammar of urgency. The canvas is stretched tight to make a roof of mourning. Maps lie open, corners held by knives, cups, a stone. The air under the awning feels 2 degrees kinder than the air beyond. Men arrive with the faces of men who have not finished sleeping and will not finish until the season allows it. Words chosen for the meeting wait on their tongues. Relieve, hold, bait, burn, faint, form. Raymond speaks first, or not first, but with the weight of a man who has paid for distance with his own stores. He traces the road to the lake with a flat palm and taps the spring behind them with the blunt end of a quill. Water chooses, do not choose against it. He is not timid, he is prioritizing. He points to heat where others point to glory. He calls delay a tactic, not a flaw. Other voices answer with a tempo that feels like courage, and sometimes is. The town is under pressure. A kingdom must be seen to move. The banner does not dismiss itself. They point to the lake and call it obligation. They speak of morale as if it were a skin you must keep full. They are not foolish. They fear becoming so. The masters of the orders contribute the language of logistics. If we go, we start in darkness. We go tight. We go quiet. We go with enough water to hold a line if the day grows mean. We do not string out from impatience. We do not accept a slope without formation. Their sentences have the dignity of checklists. They have carried men off roads that pride put them on. A cooler voice reminds the table. Smoke spreads as far as wind allows. A camp that believes itself surrounded at third hour may be only harassed at first light. Relief requires clarity. Another voice replies, clarity grows with movement. Stillness breeds rumor. The table nods without agreement. Cups are refilled and not drunk. Guy listens to the map through the men. He hears the town's name, his own name, the kingdom's name. He hears the silence that follows the word wait and the breath that follows the word march. He hears how each word will sound when retold. The crown is heavier when someone else describes it. While counsel is taken, letters move like chess in slow motion. Saladin's envoys deliver statements with courtesy edged in iron. Release, repay, respect the truce you broke. The replies are also courteous and also edged. This is ours. We yield neither face nor right to demand. Between lines, both sides right, we will choose the ground, and the hour will not surprise us. Every scribe knows this is bravado. Every scribe copies it well. Oaths are renewed. Do not flee. Do not pursue folly. Do not break formation for prizes that glitter like mercy and melt like it when held too long. Blessings are given to men tired of being blessed. Arms are checked, not admired. Wheels are greased, skins lined in shade. Shade mapped for the march, shade mapped for a stand, shade mapped in case someone must pretend to be patient when they are not. Heat is not an event. It's a decision the day keeps making. The season leans toward its harder voice. The ground, already thirsty, drinks the dew and has none to spare for hoof or heel. The breeze off the lake keeps its bargain early, then leaves the ridge to its own resources till evening returns. Scouts add small notes to their reports. Smoke used to drive, not to hide. Brush trimmed to burn crueler. Riders sent to sting and withdraw. Drums muted, trumpets absent. The ridge stores these details like a ledger. To the east, a long, bright promise of water. To the west, a trustworthy spring. Between them, one saddle that will force men to move as lines and not as wishes. Whatever resolution the council finds, the land has prepared its side of the conversation. He does not love inaction. He respects cost. He names the second hour at which a column, if it leaves too late, arrives too dry. He names the fold of ground where formation will loosen if pushed and remain firm if not. He points to a small cistern on the way that is less than people think, and argues against planning with numbers that soothe rather than hold. He speaks for patience, knowing he will be accused of fear by men who don't count in cups. Other men answer with the logic of banners. A town signals, a host responds. If we are the field, we must be seen in the field. Ambush is braved by cohesion, heat is braved by timing, thirst is braved by discipline. They suggest a march that arrives like dawn itself, early, gathered, quicker than rumor expected. In this rhythm, Hattin is not a trap. It is a hallway you walk briskly through before the door closes. The argument is not noise. It is a tuning. Each voice exacts concessions from the other. Earlier start, tighter order, more skins, smaller baggage, scouts fanned wider, reserve held deeper, drums left quiet, standards kept low against wind. The compromise looks workable on parchment. Parchment is kind. At Tiberias, the citadel speaks the old language of stone and stores. Rations shift to the schedule that makes a week into a pliable thing. The townspeople learn to move in corridors of shade and to listen for the tone in a guard's voice that means stay indoors. Buckets lower and rise, ropes creak, hopes make lists with dates on them. None of this is panic. It is maintenance under pressure. Outside, the pressure is patient. Fire tests brush. Arrows test distance. Riders test reactions. No one empties their quiver in drama. Everyone waits for someone else to choose unwisely. From the council shade, a path goes forward in a curve anyone could trace with eyes closed. Sapphirias spring to the low-rising ground to the open shelf, shelf to the saddle, saddle to the first sight of lake, lake to the town's road to the gate that will not open for drama but will open for relief calmly offered in strength. It is a beautiful line on parchment. The parchment does not pant. Breathe once, gently, before the choice. In for 4. Hold 1. Out for 6. A boy carries a message from the edge of camp to the tent where maps are kept. The scouts have marked brush cut for burning. The wind is from the wrong quarter for comfort. The smaller cistern is lower than last reported. The ground near the horns is dry enough that a spark might run where it usually wanders. He stands straight while the report is read. He is given water, he drinks precisely and no more. He leaves with his mouth still wet enough to feel the grace of it. A farrier finishes a shoe and sets the hoof down like a blessing. A sergeant coils a rope again to be sure it will play out like silk instead of snatching dust into men's throats. A standard-bearer closes his hand around the staff and lets his shoulders find square without thinking. A priest folds a small cloth and tucks it where only he will know to reach for it. At the council table, the knives that held corners down are lifted. The map rolls not because certainty has arrived, but because the hour requires a shape. Across the water and the hills, a coalition that was summoned without clamor moves into the positions chosen for it. The circle is a jaw that need not bite to be dangerous. There are gaps that invite and stretches that deny. Wings that look loose are held on a thread of orders that allow them to tighten without entangling. Waterskins are counted the way arrows are. Shade is assigned like rations. There is no triumph in the air, only attention. A commander repeats to himself the distances between wells. Another counts charges that must not be wasted on the first impulse. A third adjusts the idea of where smoke will go if asked. The plan is not one sentence. It is a set of permissions and refusals ready to be spoken in sequence. Hattin is not yet named aloud. The ground is allowed to suggest it. On the other side of the map, a column is described that would shame doubt. Moving in darkness, arriving at first light, holding formation through harassment, drinking measuredly at the intermediate water, reaching the lake's edge before heat becomes the master of the schedule. The column, in this imagining, is proof and answer. In this imagining, the saddle is a step, not a struggle. Men who have marched in high summer nod slowly at this picture, not because they disbelieve it, but because they know how many small stones must behave for it to come true. A strap must not snap, a wheel must not bite. A man's nerve must hold at the cost of his comfort. Not one of these is heroic, all of these are decisive. Nothing is concluded. The map does not close. Orders do not become shouting. They become posture. Men standing where they did not stand an hour ago. Animals watered at a time slightly different than yesterday. Scouts lengthening the arc of their look. Cooks banking fires a little lower. The truce has done its work for as long as it could. The tinder is arranged. The hands that hold the spark are steady. The words relieve and hold continue to sit beside one another like two cups on the same tray. The ridge between spring and lake waits without malice. The lake waits without gratitude. The morning that will decide how confidence meets heat is not far. We keep the voice low. We keep the breath even. We keep the chapter open because the day has not ended and will not end here. The air before first light is the coolest truth a summer day will tell. Men move inside it like people who know a secret and cannot keep it for long. Canvas comes down with a whisper. Coals are pressed out under boot heels and buried with a patient hand. Waterskins touch each other as they're lifted, soft, heavy greetings that mean more than talk. The order of march is not a poem, it's a tool. A vanguard that can see dust before it becomes a worry, a main body that carries the thread of the day, a rear guard that tidies what the road tries to steal. Between the wagons and the mules, the bread and the bandages, the nails, the spare pins, the short-hafted hammers that keep a wheel from becoming an ending. Standards stay low to keep the wind from writing on them. This is not a day for declarations, this is a day for distances. At Safuria's spring, the last measures are taken with a care that looks like reverence and is just physics. Thirst is a debate won by numbers. The sergeants do not shout, they speak in fractions. 2 mouthfuls now, 1 for the road, skins topped. You can hear patience in good discipline the way you can hear grain in a full sack. It doesn't jingle, it rests. The column steps off. Not a single movement, but a wave, boot, hoof, wheel, rolling forward at a pace chosen for heat, not pride. Early on, the ground receives them kindly, the track is firm, the ruts are old friends who don't trip you if you greet them correctly. A herd of goats looks up, counts the risk, decides against it, and returns to eating. The first birds have not yet traded their opinions. The scouts stretch thin in front and to either side, each a small arrow of attention pointing outward. They read the land's footnotes. A tuft bent the wrong way, a dust smear where no hoof should have passed this early, an antline broken and remade. They are not hunting surprises, they are trimming them. As the eastern edge of the sky grows lighter, the road feels taller. It's the same ground, but light changes courage and caution in unequal amounts. Breath schedules shift. Men start counting quietly without meaning to. Steps to a camel bell, steps to the next patch of shade, steps to the moment they'll be allowed to sip. The farriers watch hooves as if they were faces. They have learned to see tiredness where others see only dust. When the first arrows arrive, they do not arrive loudly. They come the way a thought does when you're working. Small, specific, asking to be dealt with but not to be admired. They land in ground and shield and the wooden ribs of a wagon that was built for weight, not for teeth. The column's reply is a correction of posture, not a chase. Ranks dress a finger width tighter. Shields tip to the angle that steals a little heat from the sun, as well as from a shaft. Standards tilt so their staffs become spines. The harrying riders do what they were taught. Press without being caught. Sting without being pinned. Keep the road's edge unkind. They play with distance the way good hands play with string. Pull, slacken, pull again, while smoke begins to explain itself in lines along the scrub. Not yet flames, just lines. Practice strokes before the painting. The commander's hands stay close to their own ribs, where the orders live. A finger lifts, a small unit shifts to the shoulder of the road where a shallow fold gives cover. A palm opens, the rear closes the space a wagon left when a pin had to be checked. A wrist turns, a reserve walks, not runs, to a place where a slope will be a friend. There is no trumpet, only the stitched-together language of habit. Breathe again, without counting if you like. The road is doing arithmetic for us. The lake stays out of sight, the way a promise does at the beginning of an effort. The day lifts itself an ounce at a time onto every man's shoulders. Heat announces itself where the helm touches the brow and where leather hugs the collarbone. Water rations move inward, no longer for hands that happen to be free, but for hands that are asked. A man who drank greedily at dawn pays for it at mid-morning with a dry mouth and a look he thinks nobody sees. He is not blamed, he is taught. Brush takes flame where the flint spark finds resin. It is a practical fire, not a dramatic one. Smoke writes on air with a dull charcoal, the breeze keeping the letters legible and mean. The point is not to burn a foe, the point is to nudge a thought. You are hot, you are thirsty. Your good formation is a coat too heavy for the hour. Wouldn't you like to shed it? The answer is discipline. The answer is no, said with knees and shoulders rather than mouths. On a low rise where the road rests before it climbs again, a halt is called that isn't quite a halt. Feet stop, attention doesn't. The shade that exists is thin, like mercy at the end of a quarrel. Men turn their backs to the sun on instinct and find a posture that saves a sip without asking for it. Skins pass down the line with the solemnity of sacred objects and the practicality of a tool. A boy with a bruise on his forearm from lifting buckets gets a long pull and does not grin. He swallows, wipes the lip carefully, and passes the skin along, the exact habit that keeps trust from falling apart in small, stupid ways. Back on the move, the column's sound changes. There is more leather and less talk. Wheels find the deeper ruts and ride them. This is not the hour for novelty. Scouts return with the same report from 3 angles, a sign that the news is solid. Riders in the brush, smoke used to herd, ground firm, no large force showing its teeth in front, more dust to the north than before. The phrases tuck into the commander's mind like stones into a wall. The saddle of Hattin begins to draw the eye in that way a destination does when you're not yet ready to admit it's the destination. The horns do not loom. They simply resolve, as if a painter finished a few strokes and left you no excuse to pretend they weren't there. The road between them is a throat. The land on either side is a lung. The men in the column become breath. On the right, a small fold offers a trial shade the size of a blanket. A sergeant angles his sentry toward it for a count of 60. They stand inside the cool as if it were a chapel with no roof. A swallow skirts the heat that wavers above the rock and draws a private line in the air no one else can see. Everything that can husband itself does. The harrying grows bolder as the day does. A few arrows slant lower, looking for legs instead of shoulders. One finds a wheel and makes a noise the road seems to enjoy. The team halts without panicking, as if the axle were a living thing you didn't want to hurt by speaking too loudly around it. A pin is replaced with the quiet urgency of a midwife retying a knot. The unit responsible for the gap slides forward and left in the same motion, a shield raised without drama to fill what the wheel cannot. Over a small ridge, less a hill than a sentence spoken under the breath, the first scent of the lake arrives, not wet, not sweet, just the cool that rides on the back of a thought. Not far now. That thought is both friend and trouble. A friend because hope teaches feet new tricks. Trouble because hope whispers shortcuts. The column is offered the story of striking straight east to drink relief. The commanders retell the story in a better voice. We go together. We do not arrive as a rumor. We arrive as a line. Breathe. Count if it helps. Don't if it doesn't. The day is counting for you. The first attempt to push out a tongue toward water is felt more than seen. A few dozen men edging at the front, a scout's horse sliding a step too quick to the right, an eagerness that wants to become permission. The response is a small square made beautiful by practice, ranks touch, shields kiss. The eager find themselves inside a shape that moves at the right speed. It's not a scold, it's a shelter. The men who wanted water feel the shelter and nod because they know the price of a cup bought with panic is high. Smoke thickens where brush runs thin. The riders who husbanded their quivers at dawn spend a little more freely. Their mounts are light, their lines elastic. They turn harassment into a kind of walking weather. The column wears that weather with less complaint than you'd think, because wearing it is the price of not living under worse skies later. Midday approaches like a guest who does not knock. The light stops slanting and starts laying down. The leather at the wrist says more about heat than the face is willing to. Words shrink to signals, and then even the signals shrink to habit. A man wipes his mouth with the back of his hand and tastes salt and road. He does not look at the lake because looking adds distance. At the saddle, the ground does a quiet trick. It pretends to be level, and it isn't. Men who have walked here laugh without humor when they feel it. See, the shoulder sags, the calf burns oddly, the breath comes in a slightly different size. Those who don't know yet learn, and learning costs nothing more than the knowledge that you are not on a painting, you are on earth. The question of a noon halt returns. Some argue for pressing through the throat in one long exhale. Others argue for a careful pause where shade is real and not an idea. The compromise is a moving rest. The column narrows by a hand's breadth, lengthens by a little more, and the cadence slows to a pace that is not yet insulted by heat. Water moves forward by quiet design. Those who need it most get it first, and are not asked to explain why they needed it most. The reason is in their eyes. Riders to the south make a gesture that is part invitation, part taunt, a feint toward the lower ground that would quicken any thirsty body. The answer is a denial that doesn't look like one. The column gives them no thread to pull. The vanguard leans left just enough to make the feint irrelevant, then leans back to center as if a hand smoothed a wrinkle from cloth. The gesture dies of inattention. Far ahead, the bare glitter of armor under a low flag suggests a force that would like to be seen, enough to be counted, not enough to be engaged. Behind and to the side, dust plumes suggest others who have chosen to be felt rather than noticed. The column acknowledges both without changing shape. Shape is the promise. Shape is the answer. On the right of the march, a shallow cut holds a trickle that once, in a better spring, might have been a drink. Men glance and calculate and keep walking. To break formation for a mouthful would be to buy bitterness with copper coins that should be saved for bread. The discipline is not cruel. It is provident. There will be a place to drink that does not ask you to pay with your back to your friends. The horns now stand in the middle distance, the exact distance that lets a man believe he is nearly done, and the exact distance that proves he isn't. Their basalt holds heat, but the wind along their flanks pretends optimism for a heartbeat now and then. The road tips between them with the old certainty it always had. This is how you pass. The column agrees. It does not argue with geography, it negotiates. Arrows slacken briefly, an absence that means more than their presence did. It is the courtesy of a cat consulting its whiskers before stepping into a narrower space. Smoke thins, then thickens in bands that make a staircase of air. The men adjust their breathing, some count, some pray, some tell their mouths not to remember the taste of the lake just yet. All of them continue. At the saddle's lip, a brief sightline opens. Far below, the water wears a harder blue. Nearer, the land is a set of soft hands, gullies and low rises that press a formation into choices. The vanguard takes the view like a measured sip and passes it back in words. Descent workable, left easier, right safer. Brush cut recent, no large bodies formed, many small bodies willing. A note moves down the ranks. No voice, no horn, no flag, just a tendency shared. Knees loose, hips quiet, shoulders square. It's how you walk a crowded stair without spilling a tray. The road is a stair, the tray is the day. The harriers, now above and to the side, adjust their game. They test the column's patience with pause and rush, with a whistle here and a call there that mean exactly what they've meant every other time. We are near. We are not near enough for you to catch us. Would you like to try? The answer is still the same. No. Not because pride is gone, but because pride has been given a job and is doing it, holding shape. A wheel finds a stone that's old enough to have a name among teamsters. It bumps. The cart lists. Hands that have learned this particular conversation catch, lift, and lace the moment back into the line. A horse blinks, offended, and forgives instantly. Someone laughs one note. The road writes the laugh in dust and loses it, as it loses everything kindly. The day leans toward its hard light. From the lake, a boat in profile appears and disappears behind a low rise. It is going where it's going. The men on the ridge are going where they must. The lines that will decide the afternoon are not yet drawn in ink on anyone's page. They are drawn in the tilt of shoulders and the honesty of pace. The column does not stop. It calibrates. It trims talk. It tightens straps that relaxed at the last halt. It shifts the weight from one hip to the other without breaking step. Water moves like knowledge toward those who can use it to keep others steady. Breathe once, not to rest, just to notice you are still breathing. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. Somewhere a commander touches the edge of a map and thinks the thought he won't say aloud. We are on time for the hour that will try to be later than we can afford. Somewhere else, a young rider rubs his horse's neck and thinks only of the next rise. Somewhere else, a standard-bearer tests his grip and wonders briefly and without fear what wind will be in the saddle. The road is ahead. The horns are near. The lake is a thought the mouth keeps having. The brush knows which way fire will walk if asked. The men know which way they will walk without being asked. Nothing ends. The line keeps its promise to itself, and the ground keeps its promise to be exactly what it is. The march tilts into the saddle with the care you use to tip a sleeping child into a better position. The column says together in every small motion it makes. The riders above say we are here in every small motion they do not make. The day says I am hot and will say it again until evening teaches it another word. The light thins until it isn't light anymore, only memory on the stone. The column folds itself into a camp because a body needs a shape for the hours that don't move. There is no dew. The ground holds the day's heat in a quiet way, like a hand that won't let go yet. Breathe with the dark. No one says the word encircled. They say posts set, pickets out, lanterns hooded. The outward lines are staked with economy. Shields notched edge to edge, spears resting where arms can find them in the dark. Inside, a small city appears without houses. Packs squared, ropes taut, water at the middle where discipline can protect it. Fires are not fires, they are embers hidden under skirts of earth so that smoke obeys and light does not advertise. The horses tell the truth first. They toss, stamp, drag nose along rope, ask the air for water. Grooms answer with hands on necks, with words that mean not yet, with the last careful brushes that turn dust into a softer coat. The beasts drink in the noise of buckets and find it missing. They breathe and accept, because acceptance is what animals do better than men at this hour. On the ridge, the wind changes its mind and then changes it back. Smoke from brush lit in a ring does not come as a wall, it comes as a habit. A coil here, a ribbon there, pushed by riders who know how to nudge without touching. The smell is dry and old, not choking, just persuasive. It says, think of your throat. The answer is the same as earlier, only quieter. Think of your line. Water is a list. Names are called not by rank but by need. Watch, wounded, carriers, bearers, those with work that does not stop because the sun did. Mouths touch skins in precise amounts. No gulping. You can hear discipline when leather lifts and settles without argument. A man who sipped too much at afternoon now receives less. He nods because he knows why. A boy who carried double loads in the heat gets more. No one speaks his case. His case is in his hands. At the edge of the camp, a screen moves and does not rattle. Pickets stand thin and numerous. They do not look for shapes. They listen for change. The beat of hooves that stops and starts. The difference between brush that burns because it was told to, and brush that burns because it was asked to. When a string is plucked on the far side of the dark, they pass the note back with a cough that means steady, and a whistle that means closer, and silence that means no change. Inside the lines, hands do the work that keeps a night from wearing through. A strap is resewn by touch. A wheels pin is replaced, not because the wagon will move now, but because a failure at dawn costs more. A whetstone is drawn one time along an edge, and then put away, because too much sharpening turns steel into pride. Cloth is torn into strips just in case. Grain is measured dry and set aside. Barley for the horses is counted twice because a handful extra now steals a mile tomorrow. Breath again. Smaller count if you like. The choices that were arguments at Sephuria are not arguments here. They are shapes. Ranks laid on slopes that will not tilt resolve out of a man. Gaps covered by men who think of gaps first. Standards sleeping with their bearers, staffs across forearms like quiet spines. A relic is guarded the way a skin is guarded, with care that wastes no motion. Prayer is brief and honest. It does not ask for rain. It asks for endurance, for clear minds, for hands that do not fumble knots in the hour when knots matter. Somewhere in the ring, an enemy drum does not beat. The silence is an instrument too. Now and then a reed pipe pretends to be wind and then becomes wind. Talking is low and useful. Second watch, take the north face. Third watch, rotate rightward. Keep the hood on the far lantern. If you must cough, cough into your cloak. Laughter happens once, short and kind, when a mule decides a saddle blanket is a pillow and wins the point. Scouts come and go like the tide of a lake you can't see. They kneel in the dust and draw with fingers where fires sit, where riders sit, where the gaps invite and where they are bait. Their words are simple, loose ring, no massing, feints only, and they deliver them without flavor. They drink, not from the big skins, but from the measure set aside for mouths that keep the camp awake. Then they go again, their boots learning the land in reverse. A commander walks the rope lines and then the sleeping lines and then the rope lines again. He puts his palm on stone and finds heat still there, as if the day remembered. He listens to horses until the animal's breath becomes his own. He visits the water and says nothing because there is nothing to say to water that it doesn't already know. I am what I am. You are what you are. Count me and be honest. Options are weighed in low voices. A push at first light straight for the east toward the lake with formation thick enough to bite. A turn to the north to slide off this throat and find a softer descent. A hold in place and invite an error. A feint. Send light units to stir. Keep weight at the center. Leave baggage now or leave it later, and which hurts less. None of the choices are elegant. That is the shape of the night. Someone suggests a night break. Quiet, close, as a fist might slip through a hand if the hand were thinking of something else. The idea is handled and set down. The smoke answers for it. Down in the folds where men must pass, the air is busy. Torches would give more than they take. Enough hooves would slip when they must not. The answer now is to keep the ring honest with eyes and save the run for light. On the high side of the camp, men scrape shallow scoops in the ground with bows and blades. Not trenches, just hollows where a body finds a cooler pose. They line shields at angles that turn falling sparks into dead embers. They set aside brush to burn on their own terms if wind plays tricks at dawn. The habits that save energy are passed down the line. Loosen the strap at the knee. Coil the rope under your shoulder, not under your neck. Sleep with your mouth closed and your tongue against your teeth. You will keep more water that way. A physician's corner exists without a tent. Instruments rest on a cloth. A small lamp is hooded. A bowl of water is a king. The wounded are few, most of them stories written by arrows, cuts in wood, shallow in flesh. Bandages are changed with hands that have done this more often than the hand wants to remember. There is no chanting, there is the work. On the perimeter, a pair of pickets point at a glow that seems nearer. It is nearer, but not by much. Brush burns where brush was put to burn. The ring is performance, not embrace. The report goes back the same way everything goes back tonight, without embroidery. At intervals, a rider tests the limit of the line, and the line answers with a thrum of arrows that land where hooves would have been if hooves had been foolish. The rider leaves a sentence behind in dust, and does not return to finish it. In the middle night, a thin cool visits and leaves. Shoulders are not a fraction. Sleep takes the practical, the ones who can lie down anywhere and rise ready. Sleep avoids the ones who count. Counting keeps them on their feet and useful. It also keeps them awake. They walk between ropes and whisper to men who must wake at the next turn, a gentle turbulence that keeps the camp from settling too deeply. Breathe and picture the ring as breath itself, drawn in, held, let out slowly so it does not waste. A standard bearer dreams with eyes open, if that's what you call rehearsing grip and posture 100 times while the sky doesn't move. He lies on his side, hands cupped around nothing, wrists finding the angle that will make the fabric a sail and not a snag when heat and wind insist on a quarrel. The man who will stand to his left dreams nothing at all and snores like a small saw. He will not apologize. He will work. A chaplain unrolls a strip of parchment and does not read aloud. He thumbs the ink until it feels familiar and thanks the hour for being cruel in a way that can still be named. He blesses the water with a thought and the hands with another and counts to 50 without purpose. When he forgets the number, he smiles because forgetting is a kind of rest. Near the wagons, a muleteer takes a nail from his pocket and turns it in his fingers like a coin. He has 3 spares. He thinks about which wheel is most likely to ask tomorrow. He chooses now and sets the nail back. He will be right, or he will be wrong in a way that can be fixed. He ties a new thong on a knot because knots are the currency of the morning. Scouts return from the west with the same news from the east. Proof that the ring is patient rather than tight. Gaps, they say, but not for us. Gaps for the air. They draw smoke with a finger in dust and show where it goes when the breeze decides to be clever. They drink not to fill but to rinse and swallow, a gesture that refreshes more than it seems. Then they go again because going is their work. The commanders settle the watches, first, second, third, fourth, cut shorter than usual because short watches keep minds from wandering toward water. Orders are given in pairs. If this, then that. If pressure here, then weight there. If smoke blind on the north face, then lanterns down. If harriers show at the center, then reserve left oblique 24 paces, no more. The sentences are simple so that the hour can be complicated without breaking them. On the southern arc, a little line of brush catches in a seam of wind and runs fast. Men rise as one, shields tilt. A few wet cloaks, wet with what little could be spared, fall where they must. The flames learn they are not invited, and they leave. A laugh spreads like a ripple against stone and dies. The night returns to what it was pretending not to be, an argument with thirst. The stars are very clear. That is not comfort. It is company. Someone names one, then remembers he learned the name from a sailor in Acre, and wonders where that sailor is now. He hopes the sailor is sleeping in air that moves. He hopes someone will tell a story about this night that remembers the clever parts and forgets the stupid ones. From the east, a rumor of oars again, real, or a mind playing with sounds it wants. Either way, the idea of water arrives and leaves a guest who only stood in the doorway. Inside the camp, the guard at the skins runs his thumb along the seam of leather and checks the knots. He is there because the men chose him for that job, which is trust in a shape you can look at. Breathe. No counting this time. Just the ease that comes when you exhale a little longer than you thought you could. A messenger from a flank unit comes in, walks past his own thirst, speaks first. Pressure light. Harriers numbering less than at dusk. Smoke directed. No drums. Riders showing sometimes, not risking. He drinks after the report and only as much as the man with the skin's eyes agree upon. Eyes can measure as well as sticks when they practice. A young man, first season under a banner, tries to sleep and cannot. The sergeant next to him tells a story about a march that went well because someone remembered to lift a cart's tongue over a stone. The story is nothing and also everything. It has the point that all stories at this hour have, that common sense is a kind of shield kept polished by use. The young man sleeps at the second telling. Near the center, one of the older hands speaks to the men who'll stand at daybreak in the first square. His speech is not a speech. It is a list disguised as advice. When the brush lights, breathe slower, not faster. When the arrows thicken, listen for the man to your left, not for yourself. When your mouth remembers the lake, teach it to remember the skin. If the ground feels wrong, widen your stance by a thumb. If you want to run, move your toes and keep your feet. Say nothing brave. Do the next small thing right. Heads nod in the dark because the dark is the right room for that kind of talk. Past midnight, the air flattens again. The ring outside breathes closer for a while, then looser again. A pair of riders approaches to the distance where playful becomes costly and is welcomed with a clatter of shafts that land in front of hooves, a fence made of sound. They wheel away with a whistle that is not laughter, but could be mistaken for it. Ambushes are designed for men who forget themselves. The camp is remembering itself on purpose. Water is checked a final time before the hour when dawn begins to think about being possible. The measure is not a surprise, less than comfort, more than failure. It is enough for morning work if morning work is done with a clear head. The men who guard the skins are relieved by men with hands as careful as theirs. The relief is calm because calm is part of the ration. A plan for dawn is spoken in the plain grammar of if and then one last time. Push northeast under cover of the saddle's shoulder if smoke allows. If smoke denies, ride the center as if it were a stair. If harriers thicken, halt and drink by order, not by desire. If the lake shows itself and legs itch, remember the square is stronger than thirst. If the ground forces you to choose, choose together. There is a moment that belongs to no watch. The small hinge between night and not night, when the camp is all breath and the wind forgets which direction it likes. In that hinge men adjust straps, tighten chin pieces with 2 fingers, swallow what little they are given, touch the wood of a staff, run a palm along a horse's jaw, and find that the creature is awake and as ready as a creature can be for the orders of men. No one calls it morning. No one names the hour. Names make things larger. The camp prefers smaller things, knots, hands, steps, the way a body becomes a shape with others. The night has not ended. It has paused, balanced on the lip of its last dark bowl. The water sits where it sat. The smoke writes lightly and waits for an audience. The ridge is as it was, basalt, scrub, dust, a saddle that turns lines into choices and choices into lines. Breathe once more, steady and quiet, so the lungs remember their work before the day asks more of them. Men stand, not many words, not much sound. The night continues beside them as they become what the morning will require. Breathe once with the horizon as it decides to be a line again. We are still inside the shape made in the night. Posts set, water counted, minds steadied. The day does not begin so much as arrive. A slow pour of gray into forms that were already there. Orders move softly, stand to, dress ranks, take the first sip, muffle the clatter. The lake is a promise downwind. The saddle of Hattin is the doorway we must pass through to discuss promises at all. The camp unfolds into lines the way a careful hand unfolds cloth. The first squares present their quiet geometry, shields tiled to sip the early light, spears set where shoulders can remember them without looking. Nothing quick, everything decided. Harriers appear on the slopes as silhouettes rather than threats, horses drawn in thin ink against the gray. Arrows arrive as reminders, not arguments. Each one is answered by posture. A shield angled, a foot moved half a hand, a standard tested for balance and found ready. Smoke begins as pencil marks in the scrub, not yet letters, certainly not a paragraph. The push east is not a rush. It is a tide, forward, set, breathe, forward, set, breathe. The small rises and folds are treated like furniture, worked around, not bumped. On the right, a narrow gully offers a lane that would snip distance if a body ran. The body does not run. The vanguard's job is to make room, not to become rumor. Their cadence says together in small, repeatable units. When the first invitation to disorder is offered, it is offered politely. A few mounted men part, showing a strip of easier ground as if to say, drink is that way if you are the kind of men who go where ground suggests rather than where orders do. The answer is a square that hardens for 2 breaths, and then softens back into march. No chase, no retort, only the dull courtesy of cohesion. Water is husbanded like a thought you will need later. Mouths receive measures by count, not by mood. A man who nearly lifted the skin without permission stops himself without being told. He has been taught all night long by the quiet of other men's hands. The enemy's main weight does not show itself. It is a ring with slack in it, a net with space that looks like mercy and is math. Scouts come back with the same news from 2 directions, which is how you know it can be trusted. Harassment only, brush cut, smoke planned, cavalry in bands, not masses, gaps that breathe, no throat fully closed. The column continues, climbing the throat between the horns the way you climb a stair when the tray you carry must not tilt. Knees remember the night's advice. Breath is set to work rather than worry. Breathe with them once. The sun commits. It is not cruel. It is thorough. Heat settles on metal and cloth and then on thought. Smoke exchanges pencil for pen. Brush that was cut to be kindling becomes exactly what it was cut to be. The wind is not a wall. It is a hand guiding grey where a commander wants it to test nerves and lungs. Harriers bring their lines a little nearer, careful not to be trapped, careful to be felt. Their work is not to break. It is to ask. Would you like to hurry? Would you like to chase? Would you like to forget to count? The answers continue to be no, shaped by shoulders, not by mouths. The first real pause comes as a moving rest rather than a halt. Shields shade water while skins travel down the ranks. A sergeant's voice is a metronome, one mouthful, wet lips, pass it on. A boy, new to this, blinks slower after drinking and hands the skin as if it were glass. The man who receives it nods, so the boy will know he did right. Arrows thicken. Not a storm, a firm rain. The angle lowers, searching shins and wrists. Wood takes some, leather some, ground the rest. A wheel on the left complains. Men who have loved wheels longer than they loved swords kneel and answer it. A pin, a thong, a push, a lift, back in the line before pride can suggest applause. The lakeside breeze sends a cool sentence uphill now and then. It arrives thin, almost theoretical, but real enough to move the minds it touches. The trick is not to let that sentence become a command. Men look toward the glint and then decide not to, by choice. Smoke thickens in bands, not blankets. You can walk through bands. You only drown in blankets. The squares shift to sip air from the upwind edge. A cough passes along the line like a small drum, controlled on purpose, so the body remembers it may breathe out and not fight breathing. A chaplain murmurs something rhythmic. It could be prayer, it could be counting. It has the right effect either way. New harassment appears on the shoulder of the left horn. Riders who loose and leave, not daring to stay, content to occupy attention while the heat encourages a mistake. The vanguard answers by squaring and leaning into the slope 2 paces, then giving those paces back, a tide that refuses to be tricked into running out too far. Water is redistributed without ceremony. The way responsibility is redistributed in a house that works. Those who spent more strength earlier receive more now. Those who husbanded better take less now. No scolding, only arithmetic. The ring draws a little, slack withdrawn a little, pressure firming a little, not a closing hand yet, a hand that would like to be one. The men inside the ring are not prey. They are a shape. Shape is hard to eat. Breathe. Shorter count, cooler thought. The ground insists on the horns now. The saddle funnels the line where it wants it, and every seasoned body knows the body's work here. Square on slope, weight in the balls of the feet, shoulder to shield, eye on the man to your left because your left is your compass. A standard rises not for theater, for location. It is not a flag to boast with. It is a spine to gather around. Hands that have rehearsed grip in the dark find it in the light. The cloth does what cloth does. It pulls, argues, flaps. Shoulders answer with square. The weight of symbol is less than the weight of wood. Both must be carried as if neither could be dropped. Here the attempt to break for water becomes a pulse. On the low right, where the descent begins to look like solvable, a tongue of men pushes because life is persuasive. The reply is a drill repeated until it lives in ankles. Shields curl, the square becomes a cup, the cup becomes a box, the box resets the pace. No lecture, only geometry. The men who wanted the water find themselves carried toward it, but at a speed that belongs to the line, not to thirst. Some mutter, most accept. Acceptance is what keeps a body a body. On the upper left, riders try the opposite. Turn the head of the column, persuaded to look away from the throat and up toward rock. They show you the harder question and ask you to answer it for free. The square answers by staying square. Smoke is employed now as instrument, not atmosphere. Lines are set alight in thought-out places, downwind of where formation needs to breathe, upwind of where nerves live. It is not choking, but it is tiring. Men blink and water their own eyes with the smallest tears a wind will allow. Tears are not waste. They are maintenance. A reserve unit is asked to stand as a hinge. Kneelers in front, standers behind, spears at two heights that make a soft comb for anything foolish enough to test it. The harriers have no interest in combs. They are content to be wined with teeth. The standard draws a ring of steadiness around itself. A little ground gained on the low right so the cloth can stand on firmer footing. A little ground given on the high left so the cloth does not become a sail pulling men where they did not choose to go. The bearer's hands learn again what they learned all night. Relax a fraction. Do not fight the gust. Use it to breathe the cloth rather than display it. An arrow finds the shaft just below the hand. The shock travels. The bearer does not flinch in a way that matters. A second hand slides to brace. A third replaces the second. The first returns. Practice makes choreography look like grace. The true cross. If we speak its name, we do so the way we speak water. A thing carried at cost because carrying shapes courage. It is guarded as the skins are guarded, not as a trophy, as a trust. The men set to it have the same expression as the men who guard tools bound to a duty that is heavier in idea than in weight, but weighty enough. On the horns themselves, patches of rock insist on their own plan. Someone stumbles. Hands make a low wall for him without thinking. He finds his footing and offers a nod, not for thanks, but to tell the wall it did its job and may stand down. Heat clarifies into its simplest sentence. You are using more than you can replace. Sips become wetting of lips. Wetting of lips becomes the memory of wetting lips. Men perform the smallest maintenance, tongue against teeth, breath through nose when possible, shoulders loosened on purpose so muscles do not steal water by clenching. Harriers press closer on the downslope edges, the place where a line is most tempted to string. The answer is rotation, almost invisible. The tired third rank becomes fourth. The fresher fourth becomes third. No one notices whose turn to be sturdy it is because the schedule has been taught into feet. Breathe with the hing. By mid-heat, the day has taken its due from courage and from doubt equally. Both spend. The ring outside tightens in places, slackens in others. The intelligent hand that pinches only where it feels the pulse quicken. On the low right, where the slope promises relief too convincingly, pressure firms. On the high left, riders drift and test, content to keep attention expensive. The first real unraveling does not look like breaking, it looks like fraying. A file loses its proper distance. A gap opens that can be walked, not ridden. A few men step into it thinking they are mending it and discover they have made a door. A centurion, or whatever name you prefer for the man whose job is to see gaps, steps and closes it with his own body first and then with others. The door remembers it is a seam. The seam holds for the moment that was most likely to become 2 moments. Water is nearly thought now. The skins that remain are where they were always meant to be, near the standards and under hands that count. A ladle makes its quiet trip because a ladle is kinder than a skin for keeping measure honest. Lips are touched, not filled. The men who want to speak do not. The breath they would have used for a sentence is saved for the square. A push comes at the center. Not a charge, a sitting of weight. Archery grows bold enough to step 3 horse lengths nearer and then remember itself. A ripple passes through the square and is cancelled by the square itself. That is what a good square does. It translates ripples into pauses. On the high shoulder, a smaller group tries a different conversation. Dismounts, moves as feet, asks the slope to be their friend. The answer is a short fence of spear and the quiet knowledge that feet are honest but slower than shape when shape remembers itself. They fade back into riders without pride being asked to pay extra. Flags, on both sides, choose lower angles. Height is expensive in wind. Authority does not live in vertical, it lives in steadiness. The men who read flags read them fine at waist height when they must. The moment everyone had hoped to avoid takes its place. A wedge of men on the low right, overcome by the lake's logic, decide that the fastest answer is the best answer. They lean. The line around them leans to keep them. The square becomes oval, then considers being a crescent. A voice that has no pride in it says the few words that repair. Kneelers now, hold back 2, left 3. It sounds like numbers because it is numbers. Geometry returns to itself. The men who leaned are inside their friends again instead of outside them. The wind, denied a chance to go through, goes around. Smoke is relit where it had faltered. The ring breathes closer, cautious of the combed spears and the practiced front, but willing to stand at that distance where nerves and heat multiply each other. Arrows do quieter work now, less show, more insistence. They do not need to win, they need to add counting to every other task a man must remember. The standard circle holds. The bearer switches grip 3 times in a minute when a gust insists. Each switch practiced in the night, each switch bought by a forearm that will ache tomorrow if tomorrow is given. The men drawn to the cloth do not worship, they work. They step where shadow tells them to stand, then where sun tells them to move. The cloth is a clock. Attempts to escape the throat become smaller and quicker. Each one is met by small, quick answers, files sliding to make edges, edges refusing to become threads. The square's song is quieter now. It is still on pitch. A horse goes down and is lifted, not scolded. A wheel sinks and is shouldered. A young man whose mouth forgets itself is given a wet fingertip across the lips by an older hand. The boy's mind returns. He nods once. A chaplain touches the wood of a haft and takes his hand away before the bearer can feel the blessing and think about it. Harriers tire enough to be human. Their mounts ask for breath. The wind, which has been a participant all day, remembers the lake and sends a cooler sentence uphill that is both balm and tease. Men would laugh if they had spit for it. Instead, shoulders lower 1 notch, and that notch is stored for later. Then the ring attempts what rings attempt when arithmetic says it is time, not a rush, a narrowing. Riders show in fuller files, not charging, walking with decision. Arrows come at a rate that wants to be called constant. Smoke is set where lines want to be drawn rather than where they have been. This is not ambush. This is a decision. The answer, still, must be shape. The forward squares conjoin for a breath to make a thicker slice, then separate into 2 thinner ones that share an edge like bricks. The rear closes without being asked. The baggage, already stripped to what mattered, is drawn tighter. A small cart is left with its tongue turned toward the enemy on purpose. It becomes a snag that will catch a hoof later. Nothing is wasted. On the upper left, where stones can be useful tools, a handful of men begin doing what men in such places have always done, turning ground to friend. Not with frenzy, with a mason's practical hand. A small lip becomes a ledge becomes a rest becomes a step that gives back what slope stole. The harriers look, weigh the gift, decline. Ground that favors one also favors ambush. They prefer patience to opportunity when the hour is this ripe. The first collapse is not a collapse, it is an exhaustion of a plan. A push designed to carry the whole square to a lower ledge carries a third of it, then a quarter, then the idea of it, then nothing. The men who had given themselves to the idea are returned to the box by the box itself. A gentle compulsion, like being turned by a crowd toward the door you meant to take before you changed your mind. Somewhere a trumpet suggests victory and is answered by a silence that says we'll see. Trumpets are cheap when men can still stand. What is not cheap is a line that refuses to become many lines. The standard remains upright. The bearer's hands are beginning to feel like someone else's. That is all right. They were always the army's, never his own. The cross is still under watch. The skins that remain are where they must be, where shape can still drink, not where panic can pour. The ring tries once more to make haste contagious. Breakers on the low right, flankers on the high left, a weight at the center that is less weight than show. The square replies with the drills learned in cooler air. Kneelers, braced, angle, 2 paces, breathe. The exchange is more equal than the wind wants it to be. Heat does what commanders cannot. Takes coin from everyone at the same rate. Men blink slower. Horses blow and listen to their riders because listening saves effort. The smoke thins in one place only to thicken in another. The day is long enough now that it begins to think about ending. Ending is not our work here. Our work is the minute in front of us. On the right, a path downhill presents itself honestly for once. No brush, no smoke, no riders, just slope. The temptation is architectural. A captain with a hoarse voice says, "Not yet." A lieutenant repeats, "Not yet." A sergeant does not speak. He stands where the path would begin and lets his body be the sentence. Men go around him and discover that around him is back into the square. The path remains a path. The square remains a square. A single banner on the opposing side rises a little too high and gives away a hinge. A scribe would like to write that down. He cannot. He stores it. A scout uses it to slide a dozen men sideways where they will later be a surprise for a rider who thought he knew the slope. Little profits like these pay for larger prudences. The ring's pressure uses the hour that eats attention. It asks for one thing only, that a line forget itself for 8 heartbeats. The line refuses 7 times. On the 8th it wavers, then remembers the 9th. Memory is sometimes all that stands between a story and a regret. There is no trumpet for holding, there is no banner for not giving in. The victory that belongs to noon on a day like this is small. That the standard is still upright, that the square is still 4 sides, that the men who want to run have their feet under them and are using those feet to stand. An attempt to close fully from the north is visible now, lines in earnest, not merely cousins of lines. The answer is to go through rather than back. A small gate opens in the forward square, the rear steps into it. The 2 become 1 for 6 breaths and then 2 again. The ring, denied the soft belly it wanted, bites air. The air does not shout, it makes men blink, that is all. Water is nearly gone. What remains on purpose. Men chew straps to trick their mouths. Someone passes a pebble from palm to palm to keep his fingers from dreaming of skins. A chaplain presses a cloth to a man's lips and takes it back before the man thinks he should keep it. Mercy also has rations. That is how it outlasts an afternoon. The horns are behind us and beside us and still somehow ahead of our labor. That is the honest lie of terrain. It remains where it is while your body moves through versions of it that feel like different places. A ledge on the left that was enemy an hour ago becomes a friend. A slope on the right that was friend becomes cost. The map redraws itself in sweat. Arrows slacken. Not because kindness has arrived, because quivers are not wells. Riders switch to presence rather than pressure. They show you they are there, and that is nearly the same as being struck when your breath is a loan you are not sure you can repay. The square steps, not marches. The standard lifts, not waves. The cross is moved an arm's length when the wind insists. A boy who had not yet been asked for so much is asked for so much and gives it without seeing that he has done anything worth remarking. Breathe. Short even. So the thought can stay exactly as large as the ground under a single foot. The ring attempts one last persuasion before the hour tilts. Smoke walked across the center to blind, a shallow rush on the low right to pull, a serious posture on the high left to pin. The answer is less beautiful than before and just as useful. Men kneel who did not plan to, others stand who had hoped to kneel, and the shapes that matter continue to be shapes. There is strain. There is no shame in saying it. Arms tire, eyes water. The discipline that would have been luxury at dawn is wage now. The wages are paid, not in victory, not yet in loss, in still here. The day will go on making its requests. We will go on answering them, one small, countable work at a time. The horn to the left feels warmer under clouding light. The horn to the right throws a brief strip of shade no one can reach. The lake keeps laying a blue sentence along the earth that some men read and others refuse to. The map has not ended. The movement has not concluded. The square breathes. The day does not end. It changes rooms. Where ranks stood, figures now sit or lie. Where standards held their breath, poles rest against stone. The noise that remains is practical. Water moved, cords untied, hooves cooled with handfuls of dust. Smoke loosens its grip on the ridge and walks away as if bored. The first business is water. The second is shade. The third is names. Men who carried are carried. Men who counted keep counting. Skins, bandages, litters, the stretch of ground from ridge to camp and back. A line of captives forms without argument. There is not much left in a body to argue with. They hand over knives that have cut more bread than anything else, buckles that held more road than pride, scraps of cloth that mean family because someone knotted them that way. The ring that pressed all morning now works as a hand at close range, careful of edges, careful of dignity where it can be spared. Some tasks have ceremony, most do not. A cup is offered to a man who forgot what swallowing felt like. He remembers and nods. Wrists are looped lightly, then more firmly when someone stumbles. No one runs. Running belongs to different hours. Standards that were centers become objects again. The cloths are folded with the blank respect you give heavy things. Somewhere a small wooden cross is wrapped as if it were a child's toy that needs saving and cannot be saved that way. Men tasked with guarding it guard the memory of guarding it instead. On a strip of level ground, wounded speak to one another with eyes and shoulders while bandages trade places. A chaplain wipes a brow and does not ask questions a mouth cannot shape. A physician weighs whether to sew or bind. Binding wins because sewing asks for water. The cuts the day made are tidy compared to the work of heat. For the heat there is only a hand, a shadow, the patience of breathing slow. Captivity is not a single shape. Nobles are separated for oaths and ransoms. Common men are gathered for counting and moving. Lists are started that will carry many lines before they end. Who owes, who can pay, who will stand surety, who will carry letters to families that need numbers more than words. Ink is coaxed onto parchment with the care of a drought-saved cup poured into a dry garden. Among the captured, calm arrives in pockets. Two men exchange the same joke they told on the march, and it lands or doesn't. Either way, their faces soften. Another rolls a pebble in his palm because a palm remembers work better when it has something to do. Someone hums a market tune from Acre without meaning to. It makes two others look up and blink as if a gull had flown over the ridge. Not all endings are written in ink. One man, whose name had traveled widely earlier in the year, gives back what he took from the truce. He does not travel farther. The air shifts, listens, then moves on. Others are spared for terms, for custom, for the quieter logic of later. A king sits as a prisoner and discovers that waiting has more rooms in it than ruling ever did. He drinks when told to because obeying water is older than crowns. A few who were not trapped on the ridge turn their horses to the north and west and become roads, thin, fast, already telling the day to towns that have not yet woken to it. The land learns their hoofbeats and carries them in the memory that keeps all things level in time. By the next morning, traffic is twofold, columns inward, messages outward. The ridge shrinks behind a shoulder. The map widens. On it, towns and ports look close together. A necklace along the coast. A few inland beads strung through valleys. Up close, they are days apart if your horse is tired or the wind has questions. Acre hears the story almost before the dust on it settles. Markets hush, then lift their voices in a pitch that asks what coin can do. Gates measure how long they will be gates. Some open on terms, some are found open already, their minds changed by news. A ledger in a counting house runs a line through an entry labeled shipment due and writes in a small hand, not this week. Caesarea, Asuf, Jaffa, names one can say in one breath, each take their own. Some receive envoys and choose a steady door over a splintered one. Some sit with their options, looking to sea, to road, to the temper of their walls. The sea makes its argument with sails, the land makes its argument with the history of harvests. Both arguments are sober. Ports that turn willingly watch their flags change with less noise than people expect. Businesses count the difference between yesterday's rules and today's and find they can still count. Inland, Nablus folds its markets, pays its dues, lowers this week's certainty carefully so it doesn't break. Towns that matter because they are on the way continue to matter. Towns that matter because they hold something precious weigh what precious will mean to people who did not hold it yesterday. Not all things dear are defended with stone. Southward along the coast, Ascalon knows the old dance too well to pretend surprise. Its walls have heard many voices. They listen again as terms are offered that do not try to be kinder than the day allows. Someone walks along the parapet and runs a hand along the mortar out of habit. The mortar is fine. The season is not. Decisions come in the tone you hear at the end of a bargaining day. Enough. Done. None of this is drama at the scale of trumpets. It is the sound of hinges, the scratch of pens, the clack of keys on storerooms as they change hands. When there is loud noise, it is momentary, followed by the long hum of people making adjustments, weighing water, buying bread, asking which road remains safe for a cousin who has to travel anyway. Not every city inclines when pressed. Tyre, stubborn on its island and shore, decides to be a sentence that does not take a period where one is offered. Ships bring a new mind to its walls, a man who understands that sometimes resistance is organization more than heat. Ropes are counted, timbers set, chains drawn across water. Men who thought they had arrived to buy and sell learn how to stack stones and pass word. Assaults test the door tests the habit of the attackers. Days stretch, ladders go up and then learn about falling. Engines knock and are answered with the steady language of walls that have heard knocking before. Between pushes, messengers run along the parapet with a patient trot that says the day is long and we'd better not spend our legs too soon. When a breach thinks it has found itself, the breach discovers it was mistaken by a hand's breadth and a beam's length. Across the water, flags watch each other. The sea likes this work. It carries pressure without being pressured. A ship that would have sailed to Acre trims for Tyre instead. Another rakes the news off the surface of the day and takes it north where other councils will decide what to make of it. Tyre's refusal changes the color of the map. It holds a bead on the coast that will not be threaded easily. Holding means stories later. For now it means a long chore list. Watch, mend, measure grain, match names to walls. Teach newcomers where to sleep and when not to sing. In the hills, the city that draws breath for many miles hears footsteps approaching that are not pilgrim steps. The road up is still the road up. Olives still mean what they always meant. Stone keeps the same shade. Inside, people start living to a siege rhythm before the siege begins. Wells are tested. Cisterns are skirted the way one skirts a sleeping child, lightly, with respect. Stores are counted, then counted again without saying the number aloud. A man who had meant to travel through returns, and stays. He had promised not to take arms again and is given leave to fetch his family. When he sees the city's need, he learns that promises can bend under duty as a bow does and not break. He makes nights where there were none in a ceremony that feels like mending shirts before a storm. The thread shows, the stitches are honest, the cloth holds. Terms are offered from outside, written not in threat but in a firm old hand. Open and be spared the waste that stone asks of flesh. Pay and walk under protection, resist, and the work will be harder for us all. The answer from within begins as hope sharpened by pride, then tempers under counsel. We will stand, we will also talk, bring the offers again, bring witnesses, bring the time we need to understand them. The first ring tightens and loosens at measured intervals. Engines speak the language of levers, patient, heavy, disappointing until they are not. Arrows and stones make brief arcs that convince no one to change their mind. The day finds a new equilibrium. Enough pressure to remind, enough pause to decide. Prayers are said high and low. They go where prayers go and return as focus. Men who have never wanted to be the ones to say no more practice the sentence quietly, so it will come out level when it must. A breach opens as breaches do, partly because of enemies, partly because stone ages the way men do, holding until the instant it does not. The breach draws attention the way a mouth draws breath. The defense closes around it, the offense observes, adjusts, returns. You could call it courage, you could call it craft. The city calls it afternoon and keeps going. Talk becomes terms, and terms a plan for leaving that does not spill what need not be spilled. Ransom is measured, a scale for men, for women, for children, that tries to be arithmetic rather than verdict. People who have coin count it out. People who do not have coin find strangers who do. There are gifts from a conqueror who remembers he has read the same book as those inside, in a different language under a different sky, and decides that mercy has its own column in the ledger of a season. Doors open that no ramming beam could love, and streams of families carry what they can. The clatter is pots and keys and small chests and the hollow sound of a house turned into a bundle. Lines form that no picture can hold and no sentence can finish. A child who knows little of maps learns the weight of a copper he will never see again. An old woman shakes a jar and finds enough for passage, then discovers that someone has already paid on her behalf and sets the coins in a bowl for another hand. A few remain by design, keepers of places, keepers of texts, keepers of the rhythm of a city that must keep being a city, even with different flags, because people live here and will need bread and water tomorrow. The entry when it comes is measured, not a rush. There is no appetite for breaking what you plan to own. A prayer in one tongue is answered by a prayer in another a street away. The air being air carries both without choosing. None of this ends anything. It moves work from one shelf to another. Lists are remade. Oaths are unlearned and relearned. Children learn a new word for gate and for market and add it to their old word because children keep both words when they can. The city does the things cities do. It lives. Captivity unfolds into journeys, some to coastal towns with ships whose masters know the price of weather, some north toward familiar walls, some only as far as the next market, where coin becomes bread and patience becomes a place to sleep. Ransom work is ledger work, but also theater, but also kindness. Names are matched to promises. Seals are pressed where they will be believed. Messengers carry slips and knots the way they carried lances, only lighter on the shoulder and heavier in consequence. Many go free on bond, words given by men whose words have weight. More than a few are bought from poverty by strangers who preferred to spend on someone else's tomorrow. Mercy, as ever, turns out to be a common good done in private. Among the captives, some learn to wait without souring. They count prayers, not because counting prayers changes time, but because counting is better than wearing grooves in stone. Others barter skills, mending, reading, singing quiet songs that make a camp less sharp. A carpenter arranges to fix wagon tongues in exchange for 2 extra measures of water for the man next to him. The exchange is accepted. Camp math has space for that line. News travels along the chords of these arrangements. Names go ahead to Tripoli, Antioch, Tyre. Names return from them. Someone hears that a cousin is safe behind a different wall. He breathes again with the whole of his chest. Someone else hears nothing and chooses to carry silence the way others carry weights, with hands that do not open. By the time olives are ready, the coast wears different cloth. Acre is not the place it was in July. Its piers remember the old sounds and have taught themselves the new. Jaffa's fishermen pull the same nets with different shouts. Caesarea's market learns the faces of men who stand where other men stood. Their prices change less than their words do. Nablus keeps its soap boiling and its accounts clear. This is its pride. Inland, roads learn different patrols. Tolls ask the same questions under another seal. In villages, women measure wheat with the same scoop. A boy writes his name right to left or left to right and still recognizes himself. A school that lost its master finds another. The walls of big places show new banners, the wells do not. Tyre continues to be the city that says not yet. Its stubbornness becomes a windbreak behind which plans can gather. Ships begin to carry more than people. They carry intentions. Letters that say we are coming, letters that say hold, letters that say only we have heard. The sea makes room for more sails than in other years. In Damascus and Cairo, ledgers are updated and judgments written that say this was done as it should be done, not because no blood was drawn, but because the drawing had shape and limits and a memory of tomorrow. People notice that markets remain markets. That was the point. Victory is not possession, it is being able to count rice. On the northern coasts, councils listen to tales of Hattin that arrive polished by retelling and squared by scribes. They hear the same lessons that were living under the day: water, distance, shade, patience. The words fall into different ears and begin to become different plans. Captivity holds for some, not for all. A king is let go in a spring that will have its own lines on the map. Other men are held longer and learn the art of not expecting. Ransoms close like doors after a breeze. The air inside changes slowly. Not every debt is coin. Some are favors owed by men who carry weight in rooms where water is brought without asking. Those favors travel better than mules. Along the old borderlands, castles in the deeper hills, Carac and Montreal, measure their calendars more than their walls. They will have their own dates. Later, after the olives are pressed a time or two, after other snows. For now they are mile markers in a plan that has learned not to jump. The ridge at Hattin stops smelling of smoke and learns the smell of rain again. Hoofprints settle into the language of goat and shepherd. A spearhead left in a crack becomes an object a child will find one winter when the grass is thin and bring home to a father who will keep it on a shelf without saying very much. Where flags changed, evenings look like evenings. Lamps spill the same small pools on paving stones. Bakers begin again at hours that are not really hours. At a gate in Jerusalem, a guard leans on a spear in the third watch and listens to a story about a man who slipped through with too much fruit in his basket and had to pay extra, and they both smile because markets are more reliable than empires. At Tyre, a runner checks the tide line with a stick and mutters the figures of a past month. He likes to be right and often is. At Acre, a scribe remembers to re-ink the stamp that says paid. At Nablus, a woman draws soap from a vat and stacks it to dry. Her stacks are straight, a small satisfaction. Across the water, merchant letters begin to carry a new closing, as God wills and winds allow. The phrase is old and therefore useful. New cargo lists stay boring, that is their virtue. Spices still need dryness, cloth still needs tarps, figs still bruise if you stack them wrong, no matter whose coin you take at the key. The map has not stopped moving. It rarely does. What is different is who reads it to whom and how they point. On the ridge, time grows in the seams where men's heels pressed. The black on the rock fades to a color between black and nothing. The saddle keeps being a saddle. It makes lines out of people because that is what saddles do. The lake keeps offering its cool sentence to anyone who will walk down and drink. If you stand there in a later month and listen, you can hear both stories. One about decisiveness, one about restraint, one about how a ring closed, one about how a door opened, one about a flag set down, one about a city let live. The air is large enough to keep both quietly. You breathe them in and breathe them out, and they do not quarrel inside you. A spring at Saphuria that kept its promise, a lake that glittered while asking a price, skins counted in shade, lips wetted by rule, not mood. The lesson is not dramatic. Never leave certain water for water that must be fought for unless your line can drink together. If relief is your reason, then water is your plan. The kingdom learned that distance is measured in cups, not in maps. The coalition learned that smoke and heat do the work of a second army when they are asked politely by wind. Columns that start at night carry the cool on their shoulders longer. Marching is arithmetic. Step, step, sip, shape, shape, shade. The shaded route that takes an hour more will often save hours later. A moving rest is a discipline that buys time without spending cohesion. It turns a halt into a glide instead of a gap. Hattin's throat tested whether a body could keep its cadence while the ground tried to change it. Those who remembered that pace as a tactic kept their shapes longer. Squares that kneel and stand in measured layers, standards that act like spines rather than flags, files that close doors as soon as the air thinks they're doors. The army that treated form as a tool lasted against pressures that would have broken a braver line. The army that let thirst sketch crescents where boxes were needed found that a curve invites teeth. Geometry is unglamorous mercy. It protects men from the moods of the hour. A table at Saphiria taught the cost of now and the cost of not yet. Raymond's habit of counting shade, the order's habit of counting pins, the king's habit of listening for reputation as well as truth. Counsels that keep dissent inside the tent are stronger than counsels that make certainty from volume. At Hattin, which advice won mattered less than how advice was weighed. When plans are made from springs outward, not from banners inward, fewer miracles are required. Brush cut where wind would serve it, ribbons of grey walked across breathing lines, bands, not blankets. Smoke at Hattin was an instrument. It asked lungs and eyes to spend more than was planned. The answer lay in posture, rotation, measured coughs, and the small trick of wetting the eye with tears the wind allows. Fire taught that psychology is logistics you can smell. Farriers who listen with palms, muleteers who carry the right nail, teamsters who let a cart settle before they lift it. Every wheel saved a square, every shoe saved a climb, every strap sewn at night saved an argument at noon. If you can only praise one kind of courage, praise the hands that kept the column a column. Hooded lanterns, pickets who listen to change rather than to shapes. Water guarded by trustable eyes, watches cut short to keep minds from wandering towards imaginings of lakes. Nights that ration sayings like they ration sips are the nights that let mornings work. Hattin's dark taught the useful grammar of if and then spoken so often that dawn could say them by muscle. Kneelers now, 2 back, left 3, hold. These are sentences that can be said while the body is busy. The opposite kind, draped in adjectives, waste air that squares need. Both coalitions had officers whose orders lived inside a single exhale. They are the reason men recognized each other's intentions on slopes that wanted to argue. The true cross, as a trust, guarded like a skin, standards as clocks, rather than boasts. Symbols help cohesion breathe. They must be carried with water, not instead of water. Hattin is a quiet page in the manual of where to put meaning, so that meaning helps shape rather than pulling it apart. Arabic and Latin pens disagree about tone and credit. They do not disagree about heat, thirst, smoke, and the slow closing patience of a ring. They align on water forgotten and water found, on counsel divided and counsel used, on the fact that most of the day's work was done by decisions that looked small while they were being made. Later, memory gives the day sharper corners than it had. The ridge remembers fewer corners and more weights. After the ridge, doors changed hands because talk moved faster than engines. Acre, Jaffa, Ascalon learned to value hinges over breaches. Jerusalem learned that ransom can be a bridge if counted cleanly. Tyre showed that refusal must be organized to become endurance. Hatton's aftermath taught that administration is a form of force that leaves the market open the day after. The way prisoners drink, the order in which names are written, the spare cup set aside for a messenger who spoke before he swallowed, the habit of letting strangers pay the debt of strangers. Mercy is not a mood, it is systems that allow mercy to happen. Hattin's road taught scribes to make columns for generosity, so it would not drown in improvisation. The strategic map wrote a slow sentence. A citadel at Tiberias calling a field army off its spring. A coalition choosing to turn that call into a corridor. The lesson is older than the ridge. Do not answer a baited door on the enemy's schedule when your clock speaks in wells. If you must answer, arrive as a line, not as a rumor. If you are the one who baits, choose ground that will argue for you when your tongue grows tired. Not a lack of bravery, not an abundance of thunder, not a single charge or a single speech. Hattin ran on accumulations, sips kept and lost, minutes banked and spent, straps tied or left for later, advice heard or postponed. The ridge keeps the modest truth. Craft decided what courage could afford to attempt. Make the water plan first. Red team your route for heat and shade. Try your signal set with wind in your mouth. Drill moving rests. Teach ladle discipline until men pass a skin as if it were glass. Name the shade line hour by hour on your map. Rehearse the cup-to-box drill with boys who still think bravery is loud. Give responsibility for wheels to the man who loves wheels. When council divides, write the branches as paired orders before you sleep. If smoke here, then hinge there. Miracles dislike prepared rooms. They look for mess. Give them none. Mountain teams choose slower switchbacks over direct scrambles and arrive with legs to spare. Fire crews read smoke lines the way Hattin taught. Bands, not blankets. Wind, not fear. Expedition leaders ration talk along with fuel. One problem, one breath, one decision that fits inside it. In offices where maps are calendars, the lesson is to keep projects square. Cadence beats sprints. Water first, press later. Not yet is a decision that saves the week. Throat for a pass that turns crowds into lines, shade line for the moving edge that decides when heads cool, moving rest for the glide that gathers breath without inviting teeth, ladle discipline for rationing that men trust, cup to box for geometry that rescues impulse, hinge for the small unit that makes a larger shape turn without breaking. These are working words, good on ridges and in rooms. Jerusalem's terms, Tyre's refusal, Acre's brief arithmetic, each taught that walls are not only stone, they are schedules and ledgers and the tone in which an envoy reads a sentence. The ridge gave a lesson in fighting, the towns gave a lesson in stopping when enough has been learned. Both are craft, a spear sleeve wedged into basalt, a glazed bead lost from a strap, charcoal in a seam where brush ran. A child's later hands finding each and showing them to a father who says little and puts them on a shelf. The ridge keeps an uncurated museum. The labels are weather, time, seasons. The meanings do not shout, they sit. You can learn as much by looking as by reading. Saladin's net gathered without tearing because he spent patience early and often. The king on the other side learned how heavy a crown is when water sets the pace. The orders kept roads as if roads were scripture. Raymond counted shade in a voice as flat as bread. Reynold spent speed as if speed were coin that would buy tomorrow. It did not. All of them show that leadership is not a mood. It is timing turned into kindness for men's bodies. Basalt does not admire. The saddle performs its function no matter whose boots ask. The lake offers the same sentence to anyone who will walk down and drink. I am here. You must still arrive wisely. The wind learns orders quickly and follows none. Maps look fair. Ground is honest. Hattin's gift is to keep being itself until we learn to be ourselves upon it. Where is the last certain water? And how will you love it? What is your if-then tree when smoke writes against your plan? Who closes the first gap when legs forget distance? Which orders can be said in one breath? Who counts wheels? Whose job is to dislike haste on behalf of the day? Where is the shade line at the second hour, and who knows it without looking? Which symbols travel with guards who also count? None of these questions require drums. Each of them saves men you will never meet. One stream names glory and loss, it tells a story in peaks. Another names choices, it tells a story in steps. Both streams are true, the ridge can hold them simultaneously. Chroniclers write the first, quartermasters write the second. Teachers of apprentices should copy from both. Somewhere between them is a map you can walk without drama. Carry water first, choose pace before pride, use squares like tools. Hold counsel tight and dissent kinder. Treat smoke as grammar. Pay wheels early. Sleep as preparation. Watch as mercy. Spend slowness before you must buy it at interest. Let symbols guide shape, not spend it. Count so that you can be generous on purpose. Set everything down. If your eyes are open, let them drift closed. If they're already closed, soften the space behind them where pictures float. Unclench your jaw. Rest your tongue on the floor of your mouth. Let your shoulders sink a finger width deeper into whatever holds you up. We've walked the long quiet road to Hattin and back by lantern light. The ridge and its two rounded horns, the spring at Saphuria, the lake like a cool sentence waiting to be read. We met patient hands and hurried hands, counsel that counted shade and tempers that tested doors, banners that acted like spines, water that decided what courage could afford. We watched a ring tighten without noise and doors across the coast open on terms instead of splinters. We learned how memory keeps two streams, the bright one of glory and the steady one of craft, and how the land holds both without choosing. Now we let the map fold, not with a snap, never with a snap, with care, with two fingers on the corners to keep the edges from curling. The parchment makes that soft, papery sigh, the sound that says work is over for now. Picture the ridge under a moon that has risen without effort. The horns aren't dramatic, they never were. They're simply there, patient as old furniture. The saddle is a shallow bowl for wind. The track along it is the color of a thought you don't need to finish. To the east, the lake holds its light without asking you to count it. To the west, the spring goes on being water, unexcited by history. Bring attention to the crown of your head, light as dust falling from time in a breeze. Forehead smooth like still water. Brows unknit, like paths without decisions. Eyes heavy and warm, lids resting like shields set down rim to rim. Cheeks slack, the small muscles by the nose unclench. Jaw loose, tongue resting. Lips softened as if just wetted from a ladle. Neck released, long and unburdened. Collarbones broad, shoulders sliding down and away like standards lowered respectfully. Upper arms warm, elbows easy, forearms quiet. Hands uncurled, palms empty in the best way, fingers unaware of holding. Chest gentle, rising like a hill you have time to walk. Ribs wide, breath easy. Back heavy and well supported, each muscle finding the shade line it prefers. Belly soft, no armor, a field after harvest. Hips resting square, pelvis broad as a threshold that knows both in and out. Thighs heavy and content. Knees unlatched, as unimportant as pebbles that stay where they are. Calves warm, shins forgiven for every step. Ankles unknotted. Feet resting, toes like small tents folded away. Heels sinking, satisfied earth. Breathe. Slow and kind. Nothing to do. Imagine you're carrying a small lantern, copper-framed, friendly flickered. You walk from the saddle to the western edge of the ridge where a low wall waits. As you go, you return borrowed things. At a wheel rut, you lay down urgency, it belongs to daylight. At a blackened seam of rock, you set down should have. Fire doesn't care, it blows away. At a tuft of time, you leave what-ifs. The plant prefers bees. At the low wall, you rest the lantern on stone, cup your hands around the glow and look out. The night is an honest thing, it asks nothing from you but breath. Let a short list write itself and fade. Water first. Pace as a tactic. Form as kindness. Counsel as resource. Smoke as grammar. Wheels as guardians. Night as preparation. Orders that fit inside a breath. Symbols that steady, not spend. Mercy as a system. The list folds. The page sleeps. See the quiet cast again, but softer at the edges. Saladin at a table that faces the door. Letters cooling like tea. Patience coiled for tomorrow's ordinary work. Guy with the crown in his lap for once. Fingers still. The weight of the band no longer negotiating with his palms. Raymond counting shade lines in his head for a landscape that needs no counting right now. Reynolds' bright edge set down, as even a knife must be sheathed sometime. Orders and scouts and farriers asleep in the steady democracy of fatigue, hands curled in the positions that proved most useful. Scribes with dry ink on their thumbs, the day's words dimming to a hum, all of them breathing, the ridge breathing with them, you breathing with the ridge. Gently let the hours loosen. Mid-heat unhooks from your shoulders, smoke thins. Harriers become dust, dust becomes air. The push and hinge and kneel and rise unthread like a seam unpicked without hurry. Dawn turns back into gray. The hush before orders returns to pure hush. Night returns to night. Everything that needed doing is done, or set aside to be done by daylight versions of you and me and everyone else, the versions with boots and ledgers and lists and cups. The sleep version holds nothing. Whisper if you like, or just think it. Thank you for the roads. Thank you for the water I had and the water I learned to wait for. Thank you for the shape I kept when the hour asked too much. Thank you for counsel that made me kinder to my feet. The map understands. Maps are made to be folded and unfolded without resentment. This one will be glad to see you again some other night. Square breath, softer. In 4. Hold 1. Out 6. Twice. Countless scan. Pick one small place, left thumb, right cheekbone, the hollow at the throat, and let it be the only place in the world for a few breaths. Then let it go. Weight exchange. Imagine handing today's weight to the ridge. The basalt is older than your worry. It can keep it without effort. It keeps everything without effort. Your body gets light by comparison, the way a standard grows light when 10 hands share it. Permission. Give yourself the simple order that fits in a single breath. Rest now. Again, quieter. Rest now. Once more, almost not spoken. Rest. If you surface in the night, do what we did here. Touch the ridge. Picture it. 2 rounded hills, a safe saddle, the cool lake beyond thinking. Say 1 sentence. Water first, shape steady. Breathe 4, 1, 6 twice. Return. The night will still be here. The map will still be folded. Your breath will still be enough. It's time to close rooms behind us without locking them. We close the council shade, quiet, no arguments inside. We close the armory, tools oiled, straps coiled, nothing left leaning. We close the counting room, columns added, a final dot of ink. We close the chapel and the prayer mat, words said, silence pleased. We close the stable, soft noses, soft hay, water set where it should be. We close the gate of the ridge itself, a gate that was never a gate, only a line where we decided to begin and decided to end. On a winter morning years from now, a child finds a bit of iron in a seam of Hattin's rock, a nail, a buckle, a point, brings it home in 2 hands and sets it on a low shelf. No one lectures. Someone smiles and says, "From the hills." It stays there for a long time, gathering dust the way quiet gathers meaning. The land keeps its museum. The family keeps its mourning. That is how most history rests, present, gentle, asking nothing. We have reached the far edge of the map and walked off it into dark that is friendly. The ridge holds our steps, the lake holds our reflections, the spring holds our lesson. Hattin gives back to stillness everything we asked it to carry. You don't need to remember dates, you don't need to rehearse decisions, you don't need to hold anything for anyone. The story will take care of itself, the land already has. All that remains is rest, uncomplicated, earned by nothing, withheld by nothing. Again, softer. Again, softer still. When sleep arrives, let it come in like lake air through an open door, cool, patient, and sure. Let it carry the lantern away. Let the map sleep beside you. Good night.